A proud princess walked to the edge of the sacred river Yavanna, her kingdom's most powerful symbol. She had no fear, only ambition to prove she was more than just a product of ancient curses. But what she didn't know was that the river, once poisoned by her ancestors' greed, was waiting for her, hungry for vengeance. As she stepped into the water, a sudden force pulled her under, her world spinning into darkness. In the murky depths of the river, she came face to face with a stranger who was no ordinary man. Azuka, the Merman prince, was bound by a curse to claim her, one of the last descendants of the bloodline that betrayed the river centuries ago. But unlike others who had tried to escape their fate, Zakira's defiance spoke volumes. She didn't tremble in fear. Instead, she stared him down with fire in her eyes, her resolve unbroken. What happened next would reveal long-buried secrets, reshape Zakira's destiny, and force both the kingdom and the river into a struggle for survival. Azuka, bound by ancient laws, offered her a choice: stay and heal the land and river, or escape and let the curse consume both their worlds. But Zakira was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous force in the world isn't a powerful curse or an ancient river god. Sometimes, it's the fierce will of a defiant princess. Before we dive deeper into this epic tale, we'd love to know where you are watching from. Tell us in the comments. And if you love high-stakes fantasy filled with mermaids, magic, love, and sacrifice, don't just watch, be part of our adventure. Like this video, share it with someone who loves powerful stories, and hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow, we've got an extra special story lined up for you, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. The wind howled across the valley of Yavanna like a spirit searching for something lost. The villagers whispered, "It remembers." They meant the river. Long ago, the river Yavanna flowed like a ribbon of silver through the heart of the land. People bathed in it. Farmers drank from it. Children played at its banks. It was a living thing, full of stories and power. But then, the war came. And the river changed. That was before Princess Zakira was born. Before the curse. Before anyone dared speak the name of the Merman prince. Now, years later, the river still flowed, but no one touched it. No one dared. Except today. Today, someone would step into the water. And the river was waiting. Drums beat softly in the distance. The sky above the village of Enduka was bright, but the clouds had begun to gather, slow and dark, like secrets. Princess Zakira stood at the edge of the river, barefoot, wearing a white wrapper with gold beads. Her black braids were twisted with cowries. Her skin glowed like polished bronze under the heavy sun. She was tall, proud, and her eyes burned with something stronger than fear. Defiance. Behind her stood chiefs, dancers, singers, and hundreds of villagers. They watched her closely. Some looked worried. Some looked amazed. Some, mostly elders, refused to look at all. "She's really going to do it," whispered a woman. "She doesn't believe in the curse," replied another. "She's going to wake him." "Who?" a child asked. The women shushed her. Zakira took one more step toward the river. The mud squished under her feet. The water was still. Too still. Her mother, Queen Mumbai, stepped forward and whispered sharply, "Zakira, stop this. You don't understand the danger." Zakira did not turn to look at her. Her voice was calm. "Mother, the curse is a tale. A story told to frighten children. We are building roads, schools, and lights. I cannot become queen while obeying shadows." Queen Mumbai's face was pale with fear. "This curse is older than roads. Older than your crown." Zakira took a breath. Then let the old make way for the new. She stepped into the water. The first ripple touched her ankle. Then her knee. Then her waist. The water was cold. Not like cold from ice. Cold like the silence before thunder. She turned to face her people and raised her arms. "I, Princess Zakira of the House of Niaji, daughter of Mumbai, child of fire and wind." Thunder cracked. The sky turned gray. Then purple. The water began to shimmer, like stars dancing just under the surface. People began to scream. Zakira. Get out. She looked down. A hand. Glowing blue and green. With fingers longer than any man's. It shot out of the river. Before she could scream, it grabbed her by the waist and pulled. Down. Water swallowed her like a great beast. It rushed into her ears, her nose, her eyes. She kicked and thrashed, but the hand pulled her deeper. And deeper. The light above faded. Just when she thought she would faint, she stopped falling. She opened her eyes. The water around her glowed. It wasn't like normal water. It shimmered like glass touched by moonlight. She could breathe. She could see. She was underwater. Floating. Alive. And before her stood someone, no, something. A young man with dark green skin and eyes like deep jade. His hair floated around his head like black seaweed. Fins rose from his back and arms, shining like fish scales. A necklace of sharp river stones hung on his chest. He had the body of a man, but the power of something ancient. He looked at her with sadness. And anger. And something else. "You have come," he said, his voice echoing like drums through water. Zakira stared. "Who are you?" "I am Azuka," he said. "Prince of the sacred river. Son of the waters that remember. Guardian of the curse your family made." Zakira's mouth opened and closed. "This can't be real." "It is. I'm dreaming." "You are awake." She blinked. "You're the one in the legend." Azuka's eyes narrowed. "I am the legend." She backed away. "Let me go. I didn't mean any harm." "You bathed in cursed waters," Azuka said. "You broke the law of the pact. You are the first princess in generations to touch what was forbidden." Zakira looked around. All she could see was endless shimmering water. "Why now? Why me?" Azuka was silent. Then he swam closer. "Because," he said softly, "the curse waited for a heart proud enough to ignore the past. A soul bold enough to walk into forgotten waters. And a spirit strong enough to choose." "Choose?" Zakira asked. He nodded. "Stay here in the deep. Learn the truth. Help restore what your ancestors broke. Or, return to the surface. Forget everything. But the curse will not forget you. And it will burn both your world and mine." She stared at him, breathless. "What truth?" Azuka's eyes glowed. "The river wasn't just poisoned, Zakira. It was betrayed. And I was there." Zakira's heart pounded. "What do you mean you were there?" "I was once part of your family's bloodline." The water pulsed with power. "The curse is not just for you," Azuka said. "It lives in me too." Zakira stared at the strange, glowing prince floating before her. Her thoughts spun like a whirlwind. "You were part of my bloodline?" she asked slowly. Azuka nodded, his eyes shimmering like emeralds deep in the water. "Yes. Long ago. Before betrayal stole my name from your stories." Zakira blinked. "But, you're a merman." "I wasn't always." Silence fell between them. The water around them buzzed like a held breath. Zakira crossed her arms, floating upright in the water. "I don't believe it." Azuka raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to. But the river remembers. And so do I." "Then tell me," she said sharply. "If you were once one of us, if you're really my ancestor or cousin or whatever, why are you dragging me under the water like some villain?" Azuka's face changed. The hardness in his eyes faded a little, replaced by something else, pain. "Because the curse demands it," he said. "And because I waited for someone like you." Zakira's lips tightened. "I didn't come here to play ancient games, Azuka. I came to lead my people. Not get pulled into water and fairy tales." Azuka swam in a slow circle around her. The water pulsed gently with his movement. "Do you want to know why the river is cursed?" he asked. Why your ancestors cannot drink from it, bathe in it, or speak its name without fear. Zakira narrowed her eyes. Everyone knows. During the War of Stones, my great-great-grandfather poisoned the river to stop the Ngaru invaders from crossing. Azuka stopped and floated across from her. That is the story told on land. But not the truth. Zakira crossed her arms. Then tell me your truth. The water shimmered. Azuka's voice deepened, like thunder beneath waves. Long before your people raised palaces and built kingdoms, we lived as one with the river. Your ancestors made a pact with the river god Omu. In exchange for the river's blessings, food, water, peace, they promised protection. They were river guardians. Zakira listened, her brows furrowed. But when the war came, Azuka continued, your great-grandfather, King Fanu, chose power over the pact. He did not just poison the river to stop his enemies. He poisoned it to awaken its hidden magic. Zakira's eyes widened. Azuka's voice darkened. He poured the blood of a sacred leopard into the water. Then he burned the river oracle alive at its mouth. He believed that would unlock Omu's strength. But the river god was enraged. Zakira whispered, that's not in the history books. Of course not, Azuka said. They buried the truth. They blamed enemies. And they wiped my name from the scrolls. Zakira tilted her head. Why? Who were you to them? Azuka sighed. His voice softened. I was born of two worlds. My mother, Princess Nala of Nduka, daughter of Fanu. My father was chosen by the river itself. A keeper of its magic. A son of the waters. You were royalty? Zakira asked. He nodded. I lived among the people and in the river. I was meant to be a bridge between both. But after the betrayal, the river dragged me into its depths. To save me. Or curse me. I've lived here ever since. Zakira looked away, her thoughts racing. So what does this have to do with me? Azuka swam closer. Because you are the first daughter of your line to touch the river since that day. The curse was clear, the first princess to bathe shall be claimed. The river took you, but not to punish you. Then why, she asked, her voice quieter now. Azuka's green eyes met hers. Because I saw something different in your heart. Zakira's face hardened. You don't know my heart. No, he agreed. But the river does. It knows defiance. It knows pride. It also knows pain, Zakira. And yours smells of regret. She didn't respond. Azuka turned and began swimming toward a glowing archway in the water, formed from curling vines and glowing shells. Come, he said. You want the truth? I'll show you where the curse began. Zakira hesitated. Her whole body trembled. She didn't trust this place, this prince. But something in her heart pulled her forward. A whisper in the water. A question unanswered. She followed. They swam through long tunnels of light and shadow. Strange fish flickered past, some with golden scales, others with horns like goats. Jellyfish floated like living lanterns. The walls shimmered with carvings, faces, symbols, rivers, suns. Zakira stopped at one. It showed a woman with long hair standing by the river. Her face looked like a younger Queen Mumbai. My mother, she asked. Azuka nodded. When she was a child, she was brought here. She was chosen. But your grandmother took her away before the pact could return. Zakira's mind spun. This is madness. How can my people not know this? Because they chose not to remember. They entered a grand hall, made of stone and shell, where the river swirled like a sky above. In its center stood a great statue, a merman and a woman holding hands. Zakira gasped. That's you. Azuka's voice was soft. And your ancestor? Princess Nala. My mother. Zakira moved slowly around the statue. Her fingers brushed the stone. So what now? She asked. Azuka turned to her. You have 3 days. In that time, you must decide, remain in the deep, restore the river, and lift the curse. Or return to the surface, and let the river claim your kingdom. Zakira's heart pounded. 3 days, she asked. That's not enough. Azuka's voice was steady. It's all the river will allow. After that, the curse becomes permanent. And I cannot stop what's coming. Zakira backed away, shaking her head. Why me? I didn't start this war. I didn't break any promise. But you are the first to return, he said. And sometimes, it only takes one. Zakira looked around, at the glowing river city, at the statue of his mother and hers, and then into Azuka's eyes. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt chosen. Zakira lay on a bed of woven water lilies and glowing moss inside a shell-shaped chamber. Everything in this underwater world shimmered with strange life, walls that hummed like drums, lamps shaped like jellyfish, curtains that fluttered like seaweed even when there was no current. But she could not sleep. 3 days. That's what Azuka had said. 3 days to decide the fate of her kingdom and her own soul. She turned to face the wall where riverlight rippled like fireflies. I'm not the one who broke the pact, she whispered to the quiet. But the river said nothing back. Just then, the shell doors parted. Azuka entered silently, his long hair floating behind him like black vines. He held something in his hand, a tiny stone jar wrapped in silver rivergrass. It's time, he said. Zakira sat up. Time for what? The river does not heal with words. It wants to see your heart. She stood, frowning. Another riddle. No, Azuka said. A test. He led her out into the glowing passageways. Strange creatures whispered from behind coral walls. Small river children with fins giggled as she passed, their eyes wide with curiosity. Zakira couldn't help but notice how alive everything felt down here, ancient, yes, but not dead. Soon they reached a large open chamber, where the riverbed stretched out in a great circle. Symbols glowed on the floor, spirals, eyes, flames, leaves. This is the circle of memory, Azuka said. Here, the past returns. Zakira crossed her arms. What do you mean? Azuka walked to the center and placed the jar down gently. The river will show you the truth, not with stories, but through feeling. You will not just see what your ancestors did. You will live it. Zakira took a step back. You want me to become one of them? For a moment, Azuka replied, his voice calm. Only then can you choose. Zakira hesitated. Her whole life she'd believed in forward movement, progress, reason, logic. But now, in this impossible place beneath the river, she realized how little she truly knew. And yet, some part of her heart whispered that the only way forward was back. Fine, she said, stepping into the circle. Let's see the past. Azuka knelt and opened the jar. A stream of silver mist poured from it, curling like smoke underwater. It wrapped around Zakira and suddenly, everything changed. She stood on dry land. The river roared nearby, swollen and angry. But she was not herself, her body was older, heavier. She wore royal beads and a lion's tooth necklace. Her hands were stained with red powder. She was Queen Zelita, Zakira's great-grandmother. Around her, warriors stood holding torches. A child sobbed behind her. Zakira/Zelita turned. A girl, maybe 10 years old, was bound in rivergrass, tears running down her face. The oracle must be given, a voice said behind her. The war cannot be won without Omu's power. Zakira felt her heart crack. No. But she could not stop it. Her hands, Zelita's hands, lifted a staff. She was chanting words she did not understand. The warriors brought the girl closer to the river's edge. No. No, please, the girl cried. Zakira tried to scream, to fight, but her voice was lost. She was trapped in the memory. The girl was pushed forward. Her body vanished into the river with a soft splash, and a moment later, the skies above the memory began to storm. With a gasp, Zakira fell to her knees back in the river circle. The silver mist faded. She coughed and looked up at Azuka, her eyes wide with horror. You made me feel that," she said. "You needed to," Azuka replied. "Only then could you understand what was truly broken." Zakira clutched her chest. "That was my great-grandmother. She sacrificed a child. She sacrificed the last living river oracle," Azuka said. "Her death sealed the curse. And her blood cries out still." Zakira stood shakily. Her hands were trembling. "Why did you show me that?" she asked. "To make me hate my family?" Azuka's eyes softened. "No. To make you understand that healing cannot happen without truth." He turned and motioned for her to follow. But this was only the first test. Zakira swallowed hard. "There's more." Azuka looked at her. 3 trials. 1 for truth. 1 for sacrifice. 1 for choice. That was the first. Zakira took a deep breath. And the second. Azuka began to swim again. "We must journey to the pool of echoes. There, the river will ask something from you. Something precious." Zakira frowned. "Like what?" Azuka looked back with a grim face. "Only the river knows." They swam for what felt like hours. The glowing walls gave way to darker tunnels. The water felt colder. Zakira's limbs ached, but she said nothing. Finally, they reached a large, dark cave. At its center, a pool of water floated like a mirror suspended in the air. Around it were dozens of items, crowns, swords, beads, dolls, musical instruments, floating in silence. Azuka spoke, his voice low. "This is the pool of echoes. Everyone who passes this test must give up something they treasure. The river will take it forever." Zakira looked around. "You mean, an object?" Azuka shook his head. "Sometimes it's a memory. A skill. A feeling. Even a dream." Zakira stepped forward. "What did you give?" Azuka was silent for a long time. Then he whispered, "My voice. For many years, I could not speak." Zakira stared at the pool. Her thoughts turned to her mother, to her dreams of ruling, to the coronation crown waiting back home. "What if I refuse?" she asked. "Then the trial ends," Azuka said. "And the curse continues." She took a deep breath and stepped toward the pool. It shimmered, then a soft whisper echoed in her ears. "Give your crown." Zakira froze. "But I haven't even worn it yet." "Give your dream of ruling," the river whispered. "Give the power you've longed for." Tears filled her eyes. She turned to Azuka. "If I give it up, who will I be?" He looked at her with sad eyes. "You will still be Zakira. But not the one you were before." She stood there, heart pounding. The water waited. And then she stepped forward. She whispered, "I give my crown. I give the dream." The pool swallowed her words, and her chest burned like fire. She felt something inside her rip free, her ambition, her plan for the throne, the future she had imagined. Gone. She collapsed on the floor of the cave, gasping. Azuka was at her side, holding her steady. "You did it," he said softly. Zakira looked at him, her voice weak. "I feel empty." "You won't forever," he said. The pool glowed bright, and a path of light appeared. Azuka stood. "One more test remains," he said. "One more trial. The most important." Zakira looked up at him, exhausted but determined. "I'm ready." The sacred path of light glimmered before them, soft gold stretching across the dark waters like a ribbon pulled from the stars. Zakira stared into its glow, her heart still aching from the sacrifice she had made. Her dream of ruling, the crown, the throne, the speeches she had practiced in the mirror, the reforms she had scribbled in her notebook as a child, all gone. And yet, there was something new rising within her. A strange peace. A quiet strength. Azuka swam beside her in silence. The two of them moved forward, deeper into the underwater world where time didn't seem to pass the same way. The deeper they went, the more the water around them shimmered with ancient memory and murmured voices. The trial of choice, Azuka finally said, breaking the silence, is the most dangerous. You will be given a chance to rewrite everything. But you must choose wisely. Zakira raised her eyes. What does that mean? You will see what could have been, Azuka explained. A life without the curse. A kingdom that never poisoned the river. A world untouched by pain. Zakira's heart thumped. You mean, like a dream? No, he said firmly. Like a possibility. The river will let you live it. Touch it. Believe it's real. And then, you must choose, return to your world and continue the healing, or stay in that illusion forever. Zakira's steps slowed. But it's not real. It's almost real. Real enough to trap you if your heart longs for it more than truth. Zakira frowned. What happens if I stay? Azuka's voice darkened. The curse continues. The river will flood again. Your kingdom will fall. The balance will break. And I will remain its prisoner. A long silence fell between them. Finally, they arrived at the end of the golden path, where a swirling whirlpool spun slowly in midwater, glowing with every color Zakira had ever seen. It pulsed with gentle energy, like a heartbeat. Azuka stepped aside. This is where I leave you. Only you can enter the dream current. Zakira looked at the whirlpool, fear curling in her stomach. If I lose myself in it. You won't, he said gently. Because I believe there's more to you than ambition. He looked into her eyes, and for the first time, Zakira felt something tender flicker between them, something that didn't feel like duty or magic. Something human. She nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped into the current. The world spun. Then everything stilled. Zakira opened her eyes. She was standing on dry land. Sunlight bathed her skin. Birds chirped. Laughter filled the air. And before her stood a great palace, gleaming with white stones and golden towers. Her people cheered from every direction, waving flags and singing her name. Zakira. Zakira the beloved. She blinked. A voice behind her laughed. Your Majesty, we mustn't keep the council waiting. Zakira turned. A tall woman with bright eyes and a crown of woven vines approached her, handing her a scroll. Your reforms are complete. The kingdom has never known peace like this. Zakira took the scroll slowly. Everything felt perfect. She looked around. The river nearby flowed with crystal-clear waters. Children splashed in it, and no storms clouded the skies. No curses. No fear. Her parents were alive. Her mother hugged her tightly. Her father beamed with pride. You did it, my daughter, he said. You led us into the future. Zakira felt tears sting her eyes. She wandered the palace, her heart confused. This was everything she'd wanted. Power used for good. Peace. Joy. But something was missing. She went to the riverbank. Looked into the clear water. No Azuka. No glowing depths. No memory. No warning. She felt her heart tighten. Was this truly what she wanted? Then a voice echoed softly in her ears, faint, far away. You must choose, Zakira. Azuka. The dream began to shimmer at the edges. Her parents turned to her, their smiles fading. Her people grew still. The river dimmed. Stay, a voice said. You deserve peace. You deserve happiness. But Zakira knew it wasn't real. It was a reward with chains. She closed her eyes. And whispered, I choose the truth. The dream shattered. She fell backward into the current, gasping. Azuka caught her in his arms. You came back, he said, relief filling his voice. Zakira clung to him, her breath shaking. I almost didn't. But you did. The whirlpool calmed. A warm light burst from its center, spreading out in waves. The curse had been broken. They swam back to the river palace. Everywhere they passed, the water grew brighter. Flowers bloomed along the coral walls. The river folk sang in joy. Azuka turned to her. You did more than pass the test. You gave the river a new future. Zakira looked around. What now? Azuka smiled, though sadness still lingered in his eyes. Now, the bond between river and land must be rebuilt. That will take time. He hesitated. You could help. Zakira looked back at the glowing path. I'm no longer a princess. I gave that up. No, Azuka said gently. You gave up the dream of ruling for power. But you can still lead, if you choose to. Zakira stood silently. Then, softly, she reached out and touched his hand. I'll help you, she said. Let's fix what was broken. Together. And the river sang. The river glistened with golden light. It pulsed with joy. With freedom. With life. For the first time in many generations, River Yavanna was not whispering curses or weeping poison. Its waters were soft and sweet, brushing the coral palaces and seaweed groves like a lullaby. The river folk, mermaids, fish people, and glowing spirits of old, rose from their hiding places, singing songs of old peace that had not been heard in lifetimes. Zakira stood at the center of it all, her heart overwhelmed. She had just chosen truth over comfort, duty over power. And now, the world was waking up. Beside her, Azuka turned slowly, his long fins flowing like silk behind him. He looked different now, less like the keeper of a curse and more like the prince he once was. The glow in his chest was no longer sharp with sorrow, but calm with clarity. You did what no one else could, he said, gently turning toward her. Zakira looked at her hands. They were still glowing faintly, touched by river light. But I don't know what to do next, she admitted. I'm no river maiden. I don't even know how to swim properly without your help. Azuka smiled. You learned fast. She gave him a tired laugh. It still feels like a dream. No, he said. Now, the dream is ours to build. They rose slowly through the water. As they did, dozens of river folk surrounded them. Their eyes glimmered with wonder, their voices humming in layered harmonies. Some bowed. Others clapped their hands together in ancient river greetings. One elder with a beard made of braided sea grass stepped forward. His name was Old Tambo, and he was the oldest voice in the river council. He gazed at Zakira. We felt the curse break. We heard the current sigh with joy. What gift did you offer, surface child? Zakira hesitated. I gave up my crown, my plans, my idea of what power should look like. The old merman nodded slowly. And in doing so, you learned what true power is. Azuka stepped beside her. The time has come to reconnect the river and the land. But there is much pain to heal. Many still fear each other. Then let's start small, Zakira said. Let's begin with stories. Truth. We must teach them what really happened. The council murmured. She speaks like a leader, said one. But her people may not accept a river's daughter, said another. Zakira lifted her chin. Then I'll earn their trust again. Azuka looked at her with quiet pride. She will not walk alone. I will walk beside her. The river folk nodded slowly. Old Tambo raised his staff. Then let the rite of healing begin. That night, the waters shimmered with dancing lights. From every corner of the river, creatures gathered. Colorful turtles with glowing shells. Tiny light-sprite fish that made rivers twinkle. Shell drummers pounded slow rhythms against coral drums. Even the river whales sang in deep, thunderous bellows that shook the water gently like a heartbeat. Zakira sat on a throne of woven kelp beside Azuka, her head still spinning. What is the rite of healing? She asked him. It's a promise, Azuka said. A vow between the people of the river and the people of the land. Once, long ago, your ancestors joined hands with ours here. They shared wisdom, traded gifts, protected the river together. And then, the poison. Azuka nodded solemnly. Greed shattered the pact. But tonight, we begin again. Old Tambo stepped forward, lifting a glowing bowl carved from sacred pearl. Zakira of the land, he said loudly, so all could hear. Do you vow to carry the truth back to your people? To walk with the river and speak its songs to those who have forgotten? Zakira stood. Her heart beat strong in her chest. I vow, she said clearly, to carry the truth. To walk with the river. To honor its gifts. Old Tambo turned to Azuka. Azuka, son of depths. Keeper of the curse. Heir to the waters. Do you vow to guide the riverfolk with wisdom? To seek peace, not revenge? Azuka's voice rang deep. I vow to guide with peace. To protect the balance. The old merman smiled and poured the glowing water between them. As the liquid light touched their feet, it shimmered and rose into the air, forming a glowing circle. The circle spun once, then melted into the water. The vow was sealed. All around them, the riverfolk cheered. 1,000 voices rose in joy, and fish leapt from the water, weaving patterns of light through the air. Zakira watched in awe. I never imagined your world could be so full, she whispered. Azuka smiled. It always was. It just needed healing. Later that night, when the music grew softer and the lights dimmed, Azuka led Zakira to the top of a coral cliff. From there, they could see both the underwater palace and the surface far above. Tomorrow, Azuka said, you'll return to your people. Zakira nodded. I'll tell them what I've seen. What I've learned. They may not believe you. They don't have to, she said quietly. Not at first. But I'll show them. I'll protect the river. I'll teach the children. I'll begin with the ones who listen. Azuka looked at her with deep respect. You are not the same girl who entered these waters. Zakira gave him a soft smile. And you're not the same prince who dragged me beneath. He chuckled. That was dramatic, wasn't it? Terrifying, she said. Then her smile faded a little. Will I see you again? Azuka looked toward the horizon, where the stars met the water. The river has opened its arms again. The path between our worlds is no longer cursed. You will always be welcome. Zakira stepped forward. Then I'll return. And maybe one day, land and water won't feel so far apart. Azuka reached out, gently brushing a curl from her face. Maybe one day, he said softly, they'll live as one. The river shimmered with new hope. And so the dawn of a new age began, not with a crown, but with a vow, a river's blessing, and two hearts willing to heal what was broken. The surface loomed above like a dream half remembered. Zakira floated toward it, her body guided gently by a current that felt warm and familiar, like the hand of a mother she never knew she had. Her eyes blinked against the changing light, her heart caught between two worlds. Behind her, the river Uvana whispered softly. Do not forget, it seemed to say. Do not forget the song of the deep. Azuka rose beside her until the very tips of his hair floated around his glowing crown of coral and pearls. He looked at her with pride, but something bittersweet lingered behind his eyes. I'll walk as far as I can, he said. But once you break the water's skin, I must return. Zakira nodded slowly, water dripping from her lashes. I'll come back. You'll always have a place here. They reached the surface, and Zakira's head broke through first. The morning sun greeted her with a burst of gold and orange, as if the sky itself had been waiting for her return. Gasping softly, she looked around. The riverside was still and quiet, but something had changed. The sky was clearer than she remembered. Birds chirped in gentle song. Flowers along the banks had begun to bloom, wild lilies and river roses, untamed and free. She pulled herself to the muddy shore, every inch of her body heavy with magic. Azuka paused just below the surface, only his eyes and crown showing. Zakira, he called gently. She turned back. Yes. Don't let them silence the river's truth. Even when they laugh, even when they turn away. She swallowed, then nodded. I won't. With that, Azuka gave her a final look and slipped beneath the water like a silver shadow. The ripples smoothed behind him. Zakira stood alone on the riverbank. She didn't know it yet, but someone had been watching. From behind a clump of papaya trees, a girl no older than 12 peeked out. Her name was Nomi, and she had come to fetch water for her grandmother. She had been hiding when the sky darkened, when lightning cracked, and when the river boiled in rage days earlier. Her village, EKA, had forbidden anyone to approach the river since then. But curiosity was stronger than fear. And now, she saw something unbelievable. Princess Zakira, thought to be lost or dead, standing alive, glowing slightly, with river pearls tangled in her hair and something new in her eyes. Nomi dropped her calabash. Zakira turned at the sound and spotted the girl. Wait, she called, stepping forward with her hands raised. Please, don't be afraid. But Nomi had already darted through the tall grass, vanishing down a hill. Zakira sighed. It was beginning. By the time she returned to EKA village, a crowd had gathered. People stared with wide eyes and whispered behind their hands. Elders stood back, measuring her with quiet suspicion. Children peeked from behind their mothers' wrappers. Warriors stood guard but did not raise their spears. Zakira's cousin, Tay, stepped forward. He was tall, proud, and next in line if Zakira had truly been lost. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. You disappeared for 3 days, he said plainly. The coronation was stopped. The chiefs began to argue. The priests thought you were taken by river demons. Zakira met his gaze. They weren't demons. The river called me. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Tay folded his arms. So the curse is real? Yes, Zakira said. And it's broken. More whispers. Some gasps. She stepped onto the center of the village square, her feet bare and still muddy from the riverbank. Listen to me, she said loudly. Long ago, our ancestors poisoned River Uvana. They broke a sacred promise. The river cursed our family, but not out of cruelty. Out of pain. Out of betrayal. She turned slowly, letting her voice reach everyone. I was taken by the river. But I saw its truth. I saw its people. I saw what we've lost, what we could still heal. River people, someone asked. Spirits, another whispered. Mermaids, a child breathed. Tay raised a hand. Are we supposed to believe this story, cousin? That you were underwater for days, made peace with glowing spirits, and now everything is fine? No, Zakira said firmly. You don't have to believe me yet. But you will see. She stepped back, removed the shell-beaded necklace that Azuka had given her, and held it up. It shimmered in the sunlight, humming softly with river magic. A wave of fresh wind swept through the square, carrying the scent of sweetwater lilies and deep stone. Every plant near the square began to bloom. Gasps filled the air. One of the elders, a wrinkled woman named Mama Yamoja, stepped forward and sniffed the air. I've not smelled the river this sweet since I was a girl, she said. This is not normal. It's healing, Zakira said. But it needs us. The river can't do it alone. We must end the war between water and land. Tay frowned. You speak of war and healing. But you left your coronation. You abandoned your duty. How do we know you are still fit to lead? Zakira's heart thudded. This was the real challenge, not Azuka's grip, not the river's curse. But this. She stepped forward and placed the river necklace in Mama Yamoja's hands. Then let the people decide, she said. Not by title, but by truth. The old woman stared at the necklace, then looked up. I believe her, she said. Others nodded. Still, others stayed silent. Zakira turned to the crowd. I will visit the villages. I will teach the children what we forgot. And if in the end, you choose another leader, I will accept that. But I will not stop protecting the river. Because it is part of us. It is us. The wind stirred again. The trees nodded. The very earth seemed to hum. And slowly, gently, many began to kneel. The drums of Eka village were silent. Instead, the wind carried the sound of rustling leaves and trickling water from River Uvana, a river once feared, now whispered about with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Zakira had returned, not broken, not cursed, but changed. Something deep in her had awakened. The villagers could feel it. That morning, Zakira rose before the sun. She stepped out of the small guest hut that had been offered to her the night before. Her royal palace was far away, but for now, she did not want silk walls or golden dishes. She needed to be close to the people. To the river. She knelt and touched the ground. "Thank you," she whispered to the earth. Behind her, Nomi, the young girl who had first seen her emerge from the river, approached with a gourd of water balanced on her head. Zakira smiled. "You were the first to see me." Nomi's eyes were wide and nervous. "You're the river princess now, aren't you?" Zakira chuckled gently. "Something like that. But I'm still Zakira. Still a girl who wants her people to be free. To be healed." Nomi sat beside her. "Mama says we can't trust the river anymore. That it took too much." Zakira looked out toward the rippling waters, now peaceful. "It took only what we poisoned first. The river remembers. But it also forgives." Nomi leaned close. "Can it forgive even old people like the chief? The one who cut the river trees last year and sold them to the foreign men?" Zakira's heart sank. That explained some of the deep sickness she had sensed in the water. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I will find out." Later that morning, Zakira called a village gathering near the Eka Grove, a sacred place where elders used to tell stories. Children sat cross-legged on raffia mats. Mothers nursed babies. Fathers leaned on carved walking sticks. Elders gathered beneath the great baobab tree. Zakira stood barefoot before them, the river necklace glowing faintly around her throat. "I did not come to take back a throne," she began. "I came to bring back the truth. The river remembers the first lie, the first cut, the first broken promise. But the river also remembers laughter, music, and the day when fish swam freely and our drums beat in rhythm with the waves." She pointed to the trees. "This land and that water are not enemies. They are sisters." A murmur spread. A man stepped forward. It was Chief Khalad, the one Nomi had warned about. His face was hard, but his steps were slow. He wore a robe of gold and crimson and carried a staff carved with river waves. "You speak well, princess," he said with narrowed eyes. "But you've been swimming with spirits, not humans. We must trade to survive. The river does not feed our families. Coins do." Zakira met his gaze. "What use are coins when the river dries up? When sickness comes from poisoned waters? When children can no longer play at the shore without fear?" The villagers murmured again. Zakira continued. "I've seen the truth, Chief Khalad. The poison runs deep. You cut the trees for silver, but you sold our soul." Chief Khalad scowled. "Mind your tongue." Zakira took a step closer. "Or what? You'll curse me again like our ancestors cursed the river." The old man blinked. The crowd gasped. The air thickened. Then, suddenly, there was a whirl of wind. Leaves rose in a small spiral. From the base of the baobab tree, water dripped upward, forming a shape like a woman's face. Gasps spread. Nomi grabbed Zakira's hand. The watery face spoke in a voice that was many voices at once, soft, deep, young, old. "She speaks truth. The river waits for healing. The river watches." Then the water face melted into mist. Silence fell. The villagers looked at Zakira with new eyes. Mama Umoja stepped forward. "The river has not spoken here in decades. We forgot how to listen." Zakira bowed her head. Then let's remember. Together. That afternoon, the village gathered for what hadn't been done in generations, a cleansing rite. Young and old marched to the riverbank, carrying offerings, not coins, not gifts of power, but songs, seeds, wooden carvings, and stories. Women threw herbs into the water. Men danced to the drums. Children ran barefoot, laughing, not from fear, but from joy. Zakira stood waist-deep in the river. She closed her eyes and felt it, the old rhythm. Azuka's voice echoed gently in her mind. Do not let them silence the river's truth. She opened her eyes, and for a brief moment, she saw a glimmer of scales beneath the water. He was watching. He was smiling. And in her heart, something stirred, not just magic, but hope. That night, the village fires burned bright. Palm wine flowed. Storytellers recited ancient tales once lost. Zakira sat beside Nomi, her hair wet from the river, her heart beating with a steady peace. But as the stars rose high, she knew this was only the beginning. One village had remembered. But many still lived in forgetting. She would have to travel. Speak. Sing. Heal. Because the curse had not truly lifted. Not yet. The curse would only fade when all the land remembered its first promise. And when Azuka was free. The night after the river's spirit spoke in Eka village, sleep avoided Zakira. The stars blinked above her like watchful eyes. A soft breeze rustled the thatched roof of her hut. Inside, Nomi snored gently, curled beside her like a pup beside a lioness. But Zakira's heart was restless. A voice stirred inside her like a distant drumbeat. The stones remember. She rose quietly, tiptoed past Nomi, and stepped out into the night. The village was asleep, but the river shimmered silver in the moonlight. It called to her, not with words, but with emotion, a pull deep in her chest, like homesickness for a place she'd never known. She walked barefoot through the dewy grass, her royal sash wrapped around her waist like a memory of the past. Her eyes turned toward the old rock path, a trail said to lead to the Whispering Stones, a cluster of sacred rocks once used by river guardians and seers before the Great Betrayal. Most said the stones were silent now. But Zakira knew silence could speak louder than screams. She reached the Whispering Stones just before dawn. The air was still. 5 ancient rocks stood in a circle, worn and moss-covered, as if they had grown from the earth itself. Each bore carvings, some faded, others glowing faintly under the moonlight. The symbols were not written in any human language she had seen in scrolls or temples. She knelt at the center. I'm not afraid of the truth, she whispered. The stones hummed. Not loud, but steady. Then, water rose between the stones, like a tiny fountain. From it, a ripple of light formed, a vision. Zakira gasped. In the shimmer, she saw a younger version of her great-grandfather, King Obesai. He stood before a river god in human form, tall, skin like dark clay, eyes swirling with stars. The god held out a gourd. Drink, and your enemies will fall, the god said. But poison this river, and you curse your blood forever. Zakira watched as King Obesai bowed, but when the god turned, Obesai poured something dark into the gourd. A poison. A lie. The vision twisted. She saw Azuka, younger, gentler, still fully human, standing beside King Obesai. They were once friends. Brothers-in-law. Azuka handed him a scroll. The pact is sacred, Azuka had said in the vision. We guard the river. Not own it. But Obesai betrayed him. And in return, the god turned Azuka into a guardian. A merman bound by grief and vengeance. The vision vanished. Zakira sank to her knees. The river's curse, it wasn't just punishment. It was justice. Azuka had been betrayed by her family, turned from man to merman, from friend to enforcer of a cruel oath. She trembled. I didn't know, she whispered. But I will fix it. The stones pulsed gently. One of them cracked. Inside was a glowing orb, a river heartstone, pulsing with light. Zakira reached out. As her fingers touched it, a voice boomed, not harsh, but heavy. Only the heir who chooses truth over power shall break the chain. And then, splash! A shape burst from the water nearby. Zakira spun, heart racing. It was Azuka. But not the Azuka she met in the deep palace of the river. He stood tall, only waist-deep in water, his hair dripping, his sea-blue skin glowing with moonlight. His trident was gone. His face was not hard with duty, but soft with curiosity and sorrow. "You saw it," he said quietly. Zakira nodded. "My family, they lied." "They did more than lie," Azuka said, stepping closer. "They broke the world." Zakira held out the heartstone. "I want to heal it." Azuka looked at it. Then at her. "You cannot do it alone," he said. "Then help me." Silence. Wind stirred the grass. The river murmured. "You would trust a cursed merman?" Azuka asked. Zakira stepped into the water until they were nearly nose to nose. "You're not the cursed one. You were the sacrifice." His eyes widened. Something in his heart shifted. He had waited for years, centuries, perhaps, for someone in her bloodline to finally understand. "I will help you," Azuka said softly. "But the deeper we go, the more dangerous it becomes." "Let danger come," Zakira said. "As long as we face it together." Far beneath the earth, deeper than any fisherman had ever dove, a dark presence stirred. A figure cloaked in shadow sat upon a throne of bones. She opened her eyes. Her voice was a hiss. "The girl has touched the stone." Another voice, a hunched servant spirit, replied, "Shall we rise?" The dark figure stood. The water around her turned black. "Let the war begin again." The river whispered in the night, but its voice was no longer sweet or welcoming. There was a new force at play, an ancient presence that stirred deep beneath the earth and water. Zakira felt it too. The river was changing, shifting beneath her feet as though it recognized the presence of something, or someone. Azuka's gaze was fixed on her, but there was a trace of hesitation in his eyes. "I told you," he said softly. "We cannot undo what has been done without paying a price. The river does not forgive easily." Zakira shook her head. "We are not here to undo the past, Azuka. We are here to fix it. We must face it together." Azuka looked down at the river heartstone in her hand. Its glow pulsed faintly, but there was something darker in the depths of its light, something ancient and ominous. He couldn't deny the power it held, but he also knew the danger it posed. "The heartstone is not just a gift," Azuka continued. "It's a key. It will open paths to places even the river gods fear. You must decide, Zakira. Are you ready to face the consequences of your bloodline's betrayal? Are you prepared to risk everything, even your own life, to heal the river?" Zakira tightened her grip on the stone, feeling its warmth seep into her skin. She was no longer a princess with a crown to wear or a throne to protect. She was a vessel of truth, a guardian of something far greater than herself. "I am ready," she said firmly. Azuka nodded, though his face remained shadowed with concern. "Then we must begin the journey. But the path will not be easy." The journey to undo the curse began in silence. Zakira and Azuka traveled along the winding river path, deeper into the sacred lands. The air grew heavier as they moved further from the village, the light of the stars swallowed by thick clouds that hung in the sky like a shroud. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath. By day, they walked through dense jungle, where the trees loomed high and the sounds of animals echoed from the depths. By night, they camped by the river's edge, where Azuka would dive into the waters, disappearing beneath the waves for hours at a time, returning with cryptic messages from the river gods and spirits. Zakira found herself growing more attuned to the rhythm of the river, as though it were speaking to her directly, guiding her steps. She could hear its heartbeat in the rush of the water, feel its sorrow in the coolness of the breeze. It was no longer just a river, it was a living, breathing entity. 3 days later, as dawn broke over the river, they arrived at a place known as the Caves of the Lost Voices. The entrance to the cave was hidden behind a waterfall, the sound of the rushing water deafening in its intensity. Azuka led the way, his movements swift and sure, as though the river had long since told him the way. Zakira followed closely behind, her mind swirling with questions. "What lies within these caves?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the roar of the waterfall. Azuka didn't answer immediately. He reached into the water, his fingers brushing the surface, and then he spoke. "Inside the caves lies the heart of the river, the source of all power, the original heartbeat of Uvana. It is where the river's magic is born and where it will die if the curse is not lifted." Zakira paused, trying to take in the enormity of his words. "You mean, the river itself?" she asked. "The magic is in the water." Azuka nodded. "Yes. But it is not just water, it is memories, stories, promises, and betrayal. The river carries the weight of everything that has happened. The curse is not just a spell. It is a living thing, and it can only be undone by facing the truth of what was done." He stepped into the waterfall, parting the water with his hands. Zakira followed, stepping carefully behind him, the coldness of the water sending a shiver through her bones. They entered the cave, and the air inside was thick and damp, the walls covered in ancient carvings that glowed faintly in the dim light. The stone beneath their feet was slippery, but Azuka moved with ease, guiding Zakira deeper into the heart of the cave. At the center of the cave, a massive pool of glowing water stretched out before them. The water shimmered with 1,000 colors, blues, greens, golds, reflecting the pulse of the river itself. Azuka turned to her, his eyes filled with an emotion Zakira could not name. "This is where the heartstone must be placed," he said. "Here, in the heart of the river. But the river's heart is not easily reached. It is guarded by the Queen of Shadows." Zakira felt a chill at the mention of the Queen. "Who is she?" Azuka's face darkened. "She is the one who twisted the river's magic. She is the one who has kept the curse alive all these years. And now, she knows you are here. She will stop at nothing to keep the river's heart locked away." A low, echoing laugh filled the cave, and a dark shadow moved across the water. Zakira tensed. The Queen of Shadows had arrived. From the darkness, a figure emerged. She was tall and ethereal, her skin as black as night, her eyes glowing with a cold fire. She wore a crown made of twisted thorns, and her hair flowed like a river of shadows. Zakira stepped back, but Azuka stood firm, his eyes narrowing. "You've come far, Princess Zakira," the Queen of Shadows said, her voice smooth as silk, but laced with venom. "But you cannot undo what was done. The river belongs to me now. And you." Her gaze fixed on Azuka. "You are nothing more than a tool. A prisoner of the past." Azuka raised his chin, defiance in his eyes. "You may have stolen the river's heart, but you will not keep it forever. I have come to take it back." The Queen of Shadows smiled cruelly. "Then let the game begin." The Queen of Shadows stepped forward, her presence darkening the already dim cave. Her eyes, glowing like molten gold, fixed on Zakira with cold amusement, as if the princess were merely a bug to be crushed beneath her heel. Zakira's heart raced, but she held her ground. She could feel the weight of Azuka's presence beside her, the steady pulse of the river in the air, but the Queen of Shadows was unlike anything Zakira had ever faced. The air itself seemed to thicken with her power, like the river was holding its breath, waiting to see which way the tide would turn. "You are the princess, yes," the Queen's voice dripped with mockery. "And you think you can undo the curse? You think you can fix what was broken?" Zakira tightened her grip on the heartstone. "I'm not here to fix the past. I'm here to end the cycle. Your betrayal will end today." The Queen laughed, a sound like the crackling of dry leaves in a storm. "You are brave, girl. I'll give you that. But bravery alone won't save you. This river is mine now." Azuka stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides, but there was no sign of the softness Zakira had seen before. His eyes were hard, cold, his voice low. "You've twisted the river, but it was never meant to be your possession. You can't keep it forever." The Queen's smile widened, a cruel, mocking thing that seemed to stretch across her face. She raised one hand, and with a wave, the water around them began to ripple and churn, swirling in violent circles. The very air seemed to grow heavier, pressing down on Zakira and Azuka. "Do you feel it?" the queen said, her voice almost a purr. "The river has grown with me, just as it once grew with you. It's in my control now. The Heartstone can't save you, Azuka. It's already too late." Azuka's eyes burned with a mixture of fury and determination. He raised his hand to the water. "You are wrong," he said firmly. "The Heartstone is not for you. It was always meant to return to the river." At his command, the water began to surge, swirling around them in a mighty whirlpool, but the Queen of Shadows responded with a force of her own, summoning tendrils of dark water to rise up and lash out at them. Zakira stumbled back as one of the dark tendrils whipped toward her, but Azuka was quick, his powerful arms outstretched, pulling her away just in time. "Stay close," he growled, his voice fierce. "We need to fight together." Zakira nodded, her pulse pounding in her ears. She wasn't just fighting for herself now. She was fighting for the river, for her family's legacy, and for the future of her kingdom. With Azuka at her side, she could feel the strength of the river flowing through her veins. The Queen of Shadows rose higher, her form becoming even more ethereal, her eyes like twin suns burning through the cave. "You think you can fight me?" she spat. "I am the river's true master. The Heartstone is mine. I am the shadow of the past, the darkness that has held this river in its grasp for centuries." But Zakira wasn't listening anymore. She focused on the Heartstone, feeling its power pulse in her hands, and for the first time, she understood what it was calling her to do. The river's magic wasn't just a force to be controlled, it was a living, breathing entity, one that needed balance, not domination. "Azuka," Zakira called, her voice firm. "We need to return it to the water. The Heartstone must go back to its source." Azuka's eyes widened. He understood. "Yes, but we can't do it alone. She's too strong." Zakira felt the weight of the Queen's power pressing against them, but she refused to back down. She stepped forward, placing the Heartstone into the water at the edge of the pool. The moment it touched the surface, a blinding light erupted from the stone, filling the entire cave. "No!" the Queen of Shadows screamed. Her shadowy form began to flicker and twist, as though it were being torn apart by the light. The water around them began to churn violently, rising in great waves as if the river itself was revolting against her presence. The Queen reached out, her hands clawing at the light. You can't. But Zakira felt a surge of energy flow through her. The Heartstone, now glowing brighter than ever, pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The water swirled around her, and for the first time, she felt the river's voice singing to her. It was a song of renewal, of cleansing, of returning to the heart of the world. Azuka stood by her side, watching in awe. "It's working," he whispered. "You're healing it." But even as the river began to cleanse itself, the Queen of Shadows was not finished. With a final, desperate roar, she lunged forward, her form dissolving into the shadows that surrounded the cave. "You have not won," the Queen hissed. "This battle is not over. The darkness will rise again. And when it does, you will regret this day." With that, she vanished into the dark waters, leaving only the echo of her threat behind. The water began to calm, the violent waves slowing, until the river was still once more. Zakira exhaled, her heart racing. She felt the warmth of the Heartstone in her hands, and the river's song was no longer one of sorrow, but of healing. The curse had been broken, but only just. "Azuka," she said, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "It's not over, is it?" Azuka shook his head. "No, it's not. The river will heal, but the darkness you felt, it will return. We are not free from it yet." The Queen of Shadows was but a part of something much greater. Zakira clenched her fists, the Heartstone still glowing in her hands. "Then we will fight until it's truly over." The cave was still, save for the soft ripple of water around them. Zakira stood motionless, holding the Heartstone, its glow now calm and steady. But the air still felt heavy, as though the very fabric of time was holding its breath. The battle with the Queen of Shadows might have ended, but her presence still lingered like a dark stain on the river's soul. Azuka remained at her side, his gaze fixed on the now calm water. The river had begun its process of healing, but it was not yet whole. The echoes of the queen's curse were not so easily erased. What will happen now? Zakira asked quietly, her voice reflecting the uncertainty she felt deep within her heart. Is the river truly healed? Azuka took a deep breath and stepped forward, his feet slipping slightly on the smooth, wet stone. He knelt beside the pool, dipping his hand into the cool water. The ripples spread out like a wave, touching the edges of the cave. It is healing, he said softly, as if speaking to the river itself. But the scars remain. The queen's darkness is a part of the river's past, and though the curse is lifted, the shadows she cast still remain in the depths. They may rise again, and when they do, they will be stronger. Zakira's heart sank. She had hoped that by placing the heartstone back into the water, the curse would be undone completely. She had felt its warmth, the sense of healing that surged through the air. But Azuka was right, the battle was not truly over. Then we must prepare, she said, resolve setting in her chest like stone. We cannot wait for the shadows to rise again. We need to find them before they find us. Azuka nodded. We will need allies, Zakira. The river is vast, and the darkness is not limited to these caves. It will spread, like a disease, unless we stop it at its source. As if on cue, the sound of rushing water filled the cave, louder this time, as if the river itself was speaking in warning. We must leave this place, Azuka said. The heart of the river is healing, but the magic here is unstable. We need to find the others, those who can help us protect the river. Zakira looked around the cave, her eyes resting on the glowing heartstone in her hands. She knew that the heartstone was powerful, but she also knew that it was not enough to keep the shadows at bay. She would need the wisdom of the river gods, the strength of the merfolk, and the courage of her own people. The Queen of Shadows mentioned something, Zakira said, her voice pensive. She said that the battle wasn't over, that darkness would rise again. What did she mean by that? Azuka met her gaze, his eyes grim. The queen was not just a figure of power, she was a manifestation of the river's corruption. She was born of the shadows that fell over this land, and she has twisted the river's magic for centuries. The darkness she controls isn't just a curse. It's a force, an ancient being that has been waiting for the right time to return. Zakira shivered. The weight of his words settled on her like a cold fog. She had always known that there were powers beyond her understanding, but hearing Azuka speak of the river's true nature filled her with a new kind of fear. Where will we go? She asked, looking at him for guidance. There is a place, Azuka said, standing up slowly, his voice full of purpose. A place where the old magic is still alive, where the river's heart beats strong. But it is not a place many go willingly. It is the Cavern of Echoes, a hidden sanctuary deep within the river, where the last of the river's guardians dwell. They are the only ones who can help us now. The Cavern of Echoes. Zakira echoed, her curiosity piqued. How do we get there? Azuka didn't answer immediately. He stared out at the water, as though listening to something far away. Finally, he spoke again, his voice low. Only those chosen by the river can find the cavern. It is hidden from the eyes of mortals. To reach it, we must follow the river's current and trust in its path. Zakira nodded, understanding the gravity of their journey. This was no ordinary mission. The river was more than just water. It was a living, breathing force, and they would need to trust it fully if they were to have any hope of defeating the shadows once and for all. Azuka turned toward her, his expression softening for the briefest moment. Are you ready for what lies ahead, Zakira? Zakira took a deep breath and raised her chin. I have no choice. The river's curse has been passed down through my bloodline. I can't turn back now. We have to end this. Without another word, Azuka led the way out of the cave, Zakira following close behind. As they made their way back into the jungle, the air seemed to grow colder. The wind had picked up, rustling the leaves of the trees. The sky overhead was a dark gray, clouds swirling ominously. As they traveled, Zakira couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows that had once been part of the Queen of Shadows now felt like they were watching her, waiting for the moment to strike. After several hours of walking, they came to a small village nestled along the riverbank. The village was quiet, its huts made from palm leaves and thatch, the smoke from cooking fires curling into the sky. But there was a sense of unease in the air. Azuka stopped, his sharp eyes scanning the village. "Something's wrong," he muttered. Zakira's heart raced. "What is it?" Before Azuka could respond, the sound of a distant drumbeat echoed across the river. It was a slow, steady rhythm, but it was enough to send a chill down Zakira's spine. "The shadows are already here," Azuka said, his voice filled with urgency. "We must leave before they find us." The steady drumbeat echoed across the village, reverberating through Zakira's chest as though it were coming from the very depths of the river. Azuka's sharp gaze darted toward the horizon, where the sun had begun to set, casting the village in an eerie twilight. The riverbank shimmered, but the shadows of the trees stretched long and ominous, as though they were alive, reaching toward them. "We have to move," Azuka said, his voice a low growl of urgency. He grabbed Zakira's hand, his grip firm but gentle. "Stay close. Don't let anyone see you." Zakira's heart pounded. She could feel the weight of the moment. The darkness was closing in, and it was clear the village was more than just a peaceful resting spot. Something was wrong here, something that the shadows had already begun to claim. As they moved through the village, the villagers stared at them with hollow eyes. There was a strange stillness to them, an unsettling calm that made Zakira's skin crawl. They moved like shadows themselves, walking in silence, their gazes fixed on the ground or on the distant river. It was as though they had lost the will to fight, as though the darkness had already taken hold. Azuka's face was grim as he led Zakira through the narrow dirt paths. "The shadows are here. I can feel them in the air. The villagers have already fallen under their influence. We must hurry." But before they could reach the edge of the village, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, cloaked in dark robes, and wearing a mask of twisted bone. Zakira froze, her breath catching in her throat. The figure's eyes glowed with a cold, unearthly light, and the very air around them seemed to darken in its presence. "Where do you think you're going?" The figure's voice was deep and unsettling, a whisper that sent a chill through Zakira's bones. Azuka stepped in front of her, his posture tense, ready for a fight. "Stay back," he warned. "This village is under the Queen's curse. You are not welcome here." The figure laughed, a cruel, raspy sound that echoed through the silent village. "The Queen of Shadows is not the only power in this land, Merman. You should know that by now. The river may have been your home, but it will not save you from what is coming." Zakira stepped forward, her heart racing. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "What do you want with us?" The figure's eyes glimmered with a twisted amusement. "I am a servant of the darkness, and I have come to bring the river to its rightful master." Before either of them could react, the figure raised his hand, and a shadowy mist poured from his fingertips, swirling around them like a living thing. The mist crept over the ground, slithering up Zakira's legs, trying to pull her down into its cold embrace. Azuka growled in fury and slammed his hand down, sending a burst of light into the mist. The shadows recoiled, but the figure only laughed again, unaffected by the attack. "You think your light can stop us?" the figure mocked. "The darkness is eternal, Merman. You cannot outrun it. You cannot fight it." Azuka's eyes burned with anger. "We'll see about that." With a swift motion, he pushed Zakira behind him and plunged his hand into the river's edge. The water rose up, swirling and glowing with an otherworldly light, as if answering his call. The river, sensing its chosen protector, reacted with force, sending a wave of water crashing toward the figure. But the shadowy figure wasn't so easily deterred. He raised his other hand, and the mist around them thickened, turning the air into a thick, suffocating fog. Zakira coughed, trying to breathe through the choking mist. "We have to get out of here," she gasped, clutching Azuka's arm. "We're not strong enough to fight him." Azuka's face twisted with frustration, but he nodded. "We can't face this alone. The river must help us." With a deep breath, he called out to the river in a voice that seemed to echo across the land, a voice full of power and ancient magic. The water beneath their feet began to churn violently, the river responding to Azuka's call. The mist shuddered and began to dissipate, but the figure's laugh grew louder. "You think you can summon the river to fight me?" the figure jeered. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." But Zakira had had enough. Her heart beat faster with a new sense of clarity. She stepped forward, placing her hands on the river's edge. "Azuka is right," she said, her voice growing stronger. "The river is not just a tool for you to control. It is alive. It belongs to the people who protect it. And it belongs to me." The figure faltered, taken aback by her words. For a brief moment, the shadows around him wavered, and Zakira saw something flicker in his eyes: fear. The river surged around her, the water rising up in waves, as though it recognized her strength. The heartstone, still glowing in her hands, pulsed with light, sending a burst of energy into the water. "Now!" Zakira shouted. Azuka nodded, his eyes blazing. Together, they called on the river's full power, and with a roar, the water surged forward, crashing against the figure. The darkness that had once seemed so impenetrable now began to retreat, driven back by the river's force. "No!" the figure screamed, his form flickering as the river's magic pushed against him. "You cannot destroy the darkness. It is eternal." But Zakira didn't back down. "The darkness may be eternal," she said, "but it can be defeated. Not today, not ever." With one final push, the figure was swept away by the river's force, vanishing into the waters with a scream of rage. The mist dissipated, and the village, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, was silent. Zakira stood there, breathing heavily, her heart still racing. The river was calm again, but the danger was far from over. The shadows had retreated, but Zakira knew they would rise again. "We've won this battle," Azuka said, his voice filled with quiet relief, "but the war is far from over. The shadows will come again. And we must be ready." Zakira nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we will be together." The village had grown still, as though time itself had paused to catch its breath after the battle with the shadowy figure. Zakira stood at the edge of the river, her fingers still tingling from the heartstone's power, her heart filled with both triumph and dread. The shadows had retreated for now, but she could feel in her bones that the true challenge was yet to come. Azuka stood beside her, his gaze still scanning the horizon, but his face was tense, his brow furrowed with worry. "It's not over, Zakira. The shadows may have been pushed back, but they won't stop coming. Not until they claim the river for themselves." Zakira turned to him, her eyes filled with resolve. "We have to find the Cavern of Echoes. The Guardians there, they're the only ones who can help us fight back the darkness once and for all." Azuka nodded, but there was something in his eyes, a shadow of doubt, perhaps, or fear. He wasn't used to seeing the river's power so directly challenged. "The cavern is a place of great danger, Zakira. The Guardians are ancient, and their ways are not always kind. We will need to prove ourselves worthy to gain their help." Zakira took a deep breath. "We have no choice. We must try." Together, they made their way toward the river's edge, where the water parted in a narrow, winding path. Azuka led the way, his movements fluid and swift, his body attuned to the river's current. Zakira followed, her mind focused on their destination. The Cavern of Echoes was said to be hidden deep within the river's flow, a place few had ever found and fewer still had returned from. Legends told of its sacred halls, where the river's oldest secrets were kept by the guardians who lived within. As they traveled, the landscape around them began to change. The dense jungle thinned out, giving way to tall cliffs and jagged rock formations that jutted out of the water like ancient teeth. The air grew cooler, the river's current faster, almost as though the water itself was urging them forward. Azuka glanced over his shoulder at Zakira. "We're close," he said quietly. "We need to be careful. The river has many eyes, and not all of them are friendly." Zakira nodded, her senses alert. She could feel the weight of the river's power all around her, but there was something else, something darker, lurking beneath the surface. She knew they weren't alone. Suddenly, the water before them began to swirl, creating a powerful vortex. The current pulled at their legs, threatening to pull them under, but Azuka's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Stay close. The river is testing us." Zakira gritted her teeth, digging her feet into the riverbed, but the force of the water was growing stronger. The vortex widened, swirling faster, and Zakira felt the pull of the river's magic trying to drag her down. She fought against it, focusing on her breath, on the river, on the purpose that had brought her here. Azuka stretched his arm toward her, and his touch, cool and steady, grounded her. "Trust the river, Zakira," he said, his voice calm and unwavering. "It will not let us fall. Not now." For a moment, everything seemed to still. The water stopped swirling, and the tension in the air eased. Slowly, the swirling vortex began to subside, revealing a hidden opening in the rock face ahead of them, a dark, yawning mouth that led into the depths of the river. This was the entrance to the Cavern of Echoes. Zakira swallowed hard, her pulse quickening with a mixture of awe and fear. "Is this it?" Azuka nodded. "We've arrived." They stepped forward, and as they crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped, and the air thickened with ancient energy. The cavern was vast and silent, the walls lined with strange carvings, symbols of the river's deep magic, depicting creatures of the sea, gods and goddesses, and ancient rites of power. The ground beneath their feet was smooth, and the sound of their footsteps echoed unnervingly through the cavern's vast expanse. "Stay close," Azuka warned, his voice barely a whisper. "The Guardians will be watching." Zakira nodded, but her heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the weight of the cavern's magic pressing against her, the ancient energy that seemed to breathe around them. She could almost hear the whispers in the air, the voices of the river's past, calling out from the depths. As they ventured deeper into the cavern, the temperature dropped even further. The walls of the cavern shimmered with an ethereal glow, casting strange shadows that danced across the stone. They passed through narrow corridors and wide chambers, each one more mysterious than the last, until they finally reached a large, open space. At the center of the room stood a massive stone altar, surrounded by glowing pools of water. Above the altar hung a crystal, glowing with an eerie light that filled the cavern with a soft, pulsing hum. The atmosphere was thick with power, and Zakira could feel the pulse of the river's magic in her bones. "This is it," Azuka said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The heart of the river's magic. The Guardians are here." Zakira stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. She had heard the legends. The Guardians of the river were ancient beings, protectors of the river's sacred magic. But she hadn't expected this. The crystal in the air was like the eye of the river itself, watching them, judging them. As they approached the altar, the air around them shifted. A low, rumbling voice echoed through the cavern, deep and ancient. "Who dares enter the Cavern of Echoes?" the voice boomed, making the very walls tremble. "You who seek the river's aid, what is it you desire?" Zakira stepped forward, her voice steady despite the overwhelming presence of the cavern. "I am Princess Zakira of Uvana, and I seek the Guardians' help. The river is in danger. The darkness that has plagued my kingdom is threatening to consume the river, and I need your power to defeat it." The air seemed to pulse with energy, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, the crystal above the altar glowed brighter, and from the shadows of the cavern, figures began to emerge. The Guardians were unlike anything Zakira had ever seen. Their bodies were made of water and light, fluid and ever-changing, with faces that seemed to shift between human and fish-like forms. Their eyes were ancient, filled with the wisdom of the river's countless years. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward. His voice was like the sound of rushing water. "You seek our help, Princess Zakira. But do you understand what you ask? The river is not a simple thing to command. It is not a tool for you to wield. It is alive." Zakira met his gaze, her heart steady. "I understand. I know the river is alive. And I will do whatever it takes to protect it, even if it means I must sacrifice everything." The Guardian's gaze softened, and for a moment, Zakira saw a flicker of approval in his eyes. "Then you may prove your worth, Princess. But first, you must face the trials of the river. Only those who are truly worthy can call upon its power." Zakira swallowed, her breath catching in her throat. The trials were legendary, and no one had ever returned from them unchanged. But she had no choice. "I accept the trials," she said, her voice resolute. The guardians nodded in unison, and the cavern's energy began to shift. The trials had begun. The cavern had grown eerily still, the weight of the moment pressing down on Zakira's shoulders. The air felt thick with the ancient magic of the river, vibrating with the promise of the trials that lay ahead. She stood before the guardians, the shimmering light of the crystal reflecting in her wide eyes. Azuka stood beside her, his presence like a constant reminder of what was at stake. The tallest guardian, whose eyes glowed like molten gold, raised his hand. The cavern trembled as his voice rang out, booming yet strangely soothing. "The river is not to be controlled. It is a force of nature, wild and untamed. You, Princess Zakira, must prove that you understand this. The trials will test your heart, your mind, and your soul. Only then will you earn the river's favor." Zakira nodded, her throat tight with a mixture of fear and determination. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. If the river was to be saved, she had to face whatever challenges the guardians would throw at her. Azuka placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. "I will be with you every step of the way," he whispered. Zakira gave him a brief nod before turning her gaze back to the guardians. The river's pulse seemed to echo in her ears, urging her forward. The tallest guardian stepped forward, his body shifting like water itself. "The first trial," he said, "is the trial of courage. You will face a vision of your greatest fear. Only by confronting it and overcoming it will you pass." The ground beneath them began to tremble as the guardians raised their arms in unison. The cavern seemed to come alive with energy, and before Zakira could react, a powerful wave of magic surged through the air, enveloping her in a rush of cold. The world around her blurred, and in an instant, everything changed. She stood in the center of her kingdom, Yavanna, but it was not as she knew it. The once beautiful city was now in ruins, its buildings shattered, and its streets deserted. The air was thick with smoke, and the river that had once flowed through the city was now a dry, cracked riverbed, its waters poisoned and stagnant. A chill ran down Zakira's spine as she saw the source of the destruction, a massive, dark creature, a shadowy figure of pure malice, its form shifting and writhing like an embodiment of the curse. The creature's eyes glowed with an unnatural, crimson light, and its voice echoed in her mind. "You failed, princess," the creature hissed. "You failed to protect your people. You are weak." Zakira's heart pounded in her chest. This was her fear, the fear of failing, of letting her people down. She had always carried the weight of her ancestors' mistakes on her shoulders, but now, standing in this ruined version of Yavanna, she could feel the crushing guilt threatening to consume her. The shadowy creature took a step toward her, its form shifting like smoke. "You are no different from the ones who poisoned the river. You, too, are a traitor to the river, and you will be its downfall." Zakira took a shaky step back, but then, something inside her stirred. She refused to let this vision of failure define her. This was not the end. She was not her ancestors. "No," she whispered, her voice growing stronger. "I will not let this happen. I will fight. I will protect my people." The creature laughed, a sound like the crackling of fire. "You think you can change fate? You cannot escape what is already written." Zakira clenched her fists. "I am not bound by the past. I am my own person, and I will not let fear rule me." With those words, the creature lunged at her, its shadowy tendrils reaching for her, but Zakira stood tall. She drew upon the strength within her, strength that had carried her through every trial, every battle, every challenge in her life. She would not let the fear of the past control her future. The darkness collided with her, but instead of being consumed, she fought back. The light of the river's magic surged through her, bright and pure, and the creature's form began to dissipate, its power crumbling under her will. "Leave me!" Zakira shouted, her voice ringing out like a battle cry. With one final surge of strength, she shattered the creature's form, and the vision of destruction vanished. Zakira gasped for breath, her heart racing, but she stood firm. The ruined kingdom, the dark creature, it was all gone, leaving only the cold, still cavern around her. The guardians were silent for a moment, their eyes studying her. Then, the tall guardian spoke, his voice full of respect. "You have faced your fear, princess. You have chosen courage over doubt. You have passed the trial of courage." Zakira exhaled slowly, the tension leaving her body. She was shaking, but she had done it. She had faced her greatest fear and overcome it. The first trial was behind her. But there was no time to rest. The next trial awaited. The tall guardian raised his hand again. "The second trial," he intoned, "is the trial of the heart. You will be shown your deepest desire, the thing you wish for most. But to pass this trial, you must choose what is right, even if it means letting go of that desire." Zakira's heart skipped a beat. The trial of the heart. The challenge of her deepest desires. She had always wanted to protect her kingdom, to prove herself worthy of her ancestors, but would her desire to restore Yavanna cloud her judgment? Would she be willing to let go of her personal wants for the greater good? The air around her began to change again, swirling with energy. The guardians' voices faded into the background as Zakira felt herself pulled into another vision. This time, she was standing at the edge of the river, the moonlight casting its pale glow on the water. In front of her stood Azuka, his eyes filled with sadness. "I cannot stay," Azuka said, his voice strained. "I have to go back to the river. I was bound to it long ago, and I cannot break that bond. Even for you." Zakira felt a pang in her chest. The desire to keep Azuka with her was overwhelming. They had come so far together, and the thought of losing him, of seeing him return to the river and never return to her, filled her with a deep ache. "I don't want to lose you," Zakira whispered, taking a step toward him. Azuka's expression softened, but his eyes were firm. "You must understand, Zakira. The river is my home. It's where I belong. I cannot turn my back on it, no matter how much I wish to stay by your side." Zakira felt a tear slip down her cheek. The pain of his words cut deeper than anything she had ever experienced, but the guardian's warning echoed in her mind, "You must choose what is right." She took a deep breath and wiped away her tears. "I understand," she said, her voice steady despite the heartache. "I want you to be free. I want you to fulfill your destiny, even if it means we must part ways." The vision faded, and Zakira found herself back in the cavern, standing before the guardians. She had passed the trial of the heart, not because she had chosen her own desires, but because she had put the greater good first. The tall guardian nodded. "You have passed the trial of the heart, princess. You have chosen sacrifice over selfishness." Zakira let out a shaky breath, but she felt a sense of pride swelling in her chest. 2 trials down. 1 to go. The guardians turned their gaze to her, their eyes full of both admiration and anticipation. "The final trial," the guardian announced, "is the trial of the soul. You will face the truth of your own heart. Only by accepting who you truly are, both your light and your darkness, will you prove yourself worthy to wield the river's power." Zakira's heart raced. The final trial. She had already come so far, but this one would be the hardest of all. The air around Zakira grew heavy with tension. The guardian's eyes shone like stars as they watched her, waiting for her to take the final step. The cavern, which had seemed so vast before, now felt like it was closing in on her, its walls pressing in with the weight of all the trials she had endured. The trial of the soul loomed before her, a challenge unlike any other, one that would require her to face herself in ways she had never imagined. She stood alone now. Azuka had stepped back, watching her silently, his usual strength now replaced with a quiet, knowing look. He knew this trial would be her hardest. The guardian who had spoken earlier, his voice deep and resonant, stepped forward. "The trial of the soul," he began, "is the final test. It is not about strength or bravery, nor is it about sacrifice. It is about accepting who you truly are. Only when you face the darkness within you, your fears, your regrets, your guilt, can you truly embrace the light." Zakira swallowed hard, her throat dry. The words hung in the air, like an omen, like a warning. She had fought so hard to get here, to prove that she was worthy of her kingdom, of the river's magic, but now, she was being asked to face herself. The very thought made her stomach churn. The guardian extended his hand, and with a single, fluid motion, the cavern around them seemed to shift. The sparkling walls of the cave began to ripple, transforming into swirling waters. The ground beneath her feet turned into soft sand, and Zakira found herself standing on the edge of the sacred river Uvana. But something was different. This wasn't the river she knew. The river was murky, its once crystal waters now dark and roiling. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and a cold wind blew, sending shivers down her spine. This was a vision, a manifestation of her soul. In the distance, Zakira saw a figure walking toward her, its features obscured by the mist. As it drew nearer, she could make out the silhouette of a woman. Her heart skipped a beat. It was her mother, Queen Iphioma. But something was wrong. The woman's face was twisted in anger, her eyes burning with accusation. Zakira, her mother's voice called, low and menacing. You have failed me. You have failed your people. All this time, you have ignored the truth, clinging to your pride, to your arrogance. And now, look at what you've done. Zakira's breath caught in her throat. She took a step back, but her feet were stuck in the sand, as if the earth itself was holding her in place. Mother, no. I've tried. I've tried to do what's right. I wanted to save Uvana, to prove myself. I didn't mean for this to happen. But the figure of her mother was unwavering, her voice growing louder, sharper. You think you can change the past? You think you can undo the mistakes of your ancestors? You are just like them, selfish, blind, weak. Tears welled up in Zakira's eyes. She had always lived in the shadow of her mother's expectations, always struggled to prove her worth. But this was something deeper, a guilt that had gnawed at her for years. The fear that she was no different from those who had poisoned the river, that she had been born into a legacy of betrayal. I'm not like them. Zakira cried out, her voice trembling. I'm trying to fix what they broke. I fought for my kingdom, for the people I love. I won't let their mistakes define me. Her mother's form flickered, the mist swirling around her as if mocking her words. But you are their blood, Zakira. Their mistakes are your mistakes. You carry the curse. You carry their shame. No matter how hard you try, you cannot escape what is written in your veins. The words stung, and for a moment, Zakira felt the weight of them pressing down on her. The river, the curse, the betrayal, it was all connected. The darkness of her past seemed to close in on her, suffocating her with its weight. But then, something inside her stirred. A flicker of hope, a spark of defiance. She was not the same as her ancestors. She had the power to choose a different path. She could heal the river, she could protect her people, she could be the one to end the cycle of pain and regret. No. Zakira shouted, her voice ringing out with newfound strength. I won't let you hold me back. I am not my ancestors. I will be the one to break the curse, to heal this land, and to honor the river in a way they never did. The mist around her began to swirl violently, the dark waters of the river rising higher and higher, threatening to swallow her whole. But Zakira stood firm, her heart pounding, her chest rising and falling with each breath. She could feel the magic of the river, ancient and powerful, surging through her. She was connected to it, she always had been. I will not let fear control me, Zakira whispered to herself, the words like a prayer, a promise. I will not let guilt consume me. I am more than my past. The waters before her parted, revealing a path bathed in soft, golden light. At the end of the path stood a figure, Azuka. His expression was calm, yet his eyes held a depth of understanding that reached straight into her soul. You have faced your darkness, Zakira, Azuka said, his voice warm and reassuring. You have accepted the truth of who you are. And now, you are ready. Zakira's heart swelled with emotion. She had done it. She had faced her fears, her regrets, and her past, and she had emerged stronger, more certain of who she was. The trial was over. The river's waters began to settle, the darkness lifting like a fog. The mist around her cleared, and she found herself standing once again in the glowing cavern. The guardians watched her with silent admiration, their faces softening. The tallest guardian spoke first. "You have passed the trial of the soul, Princess Zakira. You have faced yourself and accepted both your light and your darkness. The river's power is yours to command." Zakira felt a surge of energy, warm, pure, and powerful, flow through her. It was the river's magic, now a part of her, binding her to the land, to the water, and to her people. She had earned it, not through her strength alone, but through her courage, her heart, and her willingness to face the truth. Azuka stepped forward, his expression proud. "You did it, Zakira. You have proven yourself worthy. Now, the river is yours to protect." Zakira smiled, tears of relief and joy welling in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you." Azuka nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. They had both changed, both grown, and now, together, they would face whatever challenges the future held. The moon hung high over the sacred river Uvana, its light spilling across the water, casting silver reflections that danced like spirits in the night. Zakira stood at the river's edge, the cool breeze tugging at her hair. Her heart still raced from the trial of the soul, but now there was a calmness in her, something deep and profound that she had never felt before. The river was no longer just a symbol of her ancestors' betrayal, it was now part of her, and she could feel its pulse, its lifeblood flowing beneath her skin. Azuka stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the water. He, too, had changed. The weight of centuries, the bitterness of vengeance, had lifted from him. No longer bound by the curse, he was free, free to choose a new path. He was no longer the enforcer of an old debt, but a guardian of the river, just as she was. Together, they were bound by the river's magic, its history, and its future. "Do you feel it?" Zakira asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "The river, it's different now." Azuka turned to her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Yes. It's waking up. It's healing. But there is still much to be done." Zakira nodded. She knew what he meant. The river's curse was broken, but the damage done by her ancestors, the poison, the betrayal, the loss, was not something that could be undone overnight. The river had to be restored, and it was up to her to guide it back to health. But she couldn't do it alone. As if on cue, the sound of footsteps broke the silence. Zakira turned to see the guardians approaching, their tall figures silhouetted against the glowing moonlight. The tallest of them, the one who had spoken to her during the trial, stepped forward. His face was serene, but there was a trace of something else, concern, perhaps. "The river is healing, Princess," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "But it is not enough. The land suffers still. The poison may have been removed from the river, but the earth, the trees, the animals, everything is still touched by the curse. If we are to fully restore Uvana, we must address the land itself." Zakira's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "The river and the land are one," the guardian explained. "The poison that corrupted the water seeped into the earth, tainting the soil. The trees that once grew strong by the river are withering. The creatures of the river, once vibrant and full of life, are sickly. The balance between water and earth has been broken. If the land does not heal, neither will the river." Zakira's heart sank. She had hoped that by healing the river, the land would naturally follow. But the curse had been deeper than she realized. The earth itself had been scarred, and the restoration of the river was only the first step. "We need to heal both," Azuka said, his voice steady. "We need to restore the bond between water and earth, between land and river." Zakira looked at him, her resolve hardening. "Then we will do it. Together." The guardians nodded, their faces solemn. "It will not be easy," the tallest one said. "To heal the land, we must perform a ritual, one that has not been done in centuries. It requires the blood of the royal line and the magic of the river combined. The ritual will restore the land, but it is not without its dangers. The earth may fight back, resisting the healing, for it remembers the poison that was once laid upon it." Zakira's thoughts raced. This ritual was the key to saving her kingdom, but it was dangerous, dangerous for her, dangerous for everyone. But she had no choice. She had to do this. I will do whatever it takes, Zakira said, her voice firm. Tell me what I need to do. The guardian stepped forward, holding out a small, glowing crystal. This is a relic of the old times, a vessel to carry the magic of the river. To perform the ritual, you must place it in the heart of the river. There, you will offer your blood, your life force, to the river. In return, the river will share its power with you, and together, you will restore the land. Zakira hesitated for only a moment. The ritual required her blood, her life force. She had already faced so much, but this would be the ultimate test. She would be bound to the river in a way she could never undo. But it was the only way to save her people, to save the kingdom, to break the cycle of destruction that her ancestors had begun. Then let's begin, she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her heart. The guardians led her to the river's edge, where the water shimmered beneath the moonlight, rippling gently as if waiting for her. Azuka stood by her side, his presence a comfort. He had become her ally, her partner in this journey, and she knew she could trust him with her life. The tall guardian raised his hand, and the river's surface began to glow with an otherworldly light. The water seemed to pulse, responding to the ancient magic that was being summoned. Zakira closed her eyes, taking a deep breath as she prepared herself. Place the crystal in the water, the guardian instructed. Zakira took the glowing crystal from him, feeling its warmth against her palm. As she lowered it into the river, the water surged forward, wrapping around the crystal like a protective embrace. The river's magic was stirring, awakening once more. Azuka stepped forward, his eyes locked with hers. Are you ready? Zakira nodded. I am. With a deep breath, she cut her palm with a shard of stone, her blood pooling in her hand. She held it over the crystal, and as her blood dripped into the water, a shock of energy shot through her, filling her with an overwhelming sense of power. The river's magic surged through her veins, its ancient energy coursing through her body, binding her to the land, to the water, and to the very soul of the kingdom. The ground beneath her feet began to tremble, and the river's surface became a maelstrom of energy. The sky above darkened, swirling with clouds. Zakira's heart raced as the magic of the river and the earth merged. She could feel the land resisting, fighting against the healing, but she held firm, her resolve unwavering. The guardian's voice rose above the chaos. Stay strong, princess. The earth will fight you, but you must endure. You must show it that you are its protector, not its destroyer. Zakira clenched her fists, feeling the strength of the river's magic flowing through her. She could hear the whispers of the river god, ancient and wise, urging her on. I will protect you, she whispered, her voice a vow to the river, to the land, to the people she loved. As the storm above them reached its peak, the river's magic exploded outward, enveloping the land in a blinding light. For a moment, everything went still. And then, slowly, the world began to change. The waters of the river cleared, their once dark depths now shining with purity. The trees along the riverbank straightened, their leaves turning a vibrant green, and the creatures of the river returned, swimming through the waters with renewed life. The curse was lifted. The land was healing. But Zakira knew that the journey was far from over. There were still battles to fight, still enemies to face. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready. The river had chosen her. And now, she would protect it with all her heart. The land was healing. The river, once poisoned and cursed, now flowed with clarity and life. The trees stood taller, their branches reaching skyward, strong once more, and the animals that had disappeared returned, their vibrant colors dancing in the sunlight. The bond between the river and the land had been restored, and the curse that had plagued her family for generations had finally been broken. Yet, as Zakira stood on the banks of River Yavanna, watching the transformation unfold, a strange unease stirred in her heart. She had done what she had to do, she had healed the land, restored the river, and fulfilled the ancient prophecy. But the journey ahead was far from over. Azuka, standing beside her, seemed to sense her apprehension. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, his voice quiet but steady. You've done more than anyone could have ever expected, princess. The river is free, and so are you. You've broken the chains of your ancestors. Zakira nodded, but the weight of the future hung heavy on her mind. the healing was only the beginning. Now, there were new questions to answer, about the land, about the river, about the powers that still lingered in the shadows. "Azuka, do you think this is truly over?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the river. "Or is this just the calm before another storm?" Azuka's eyes softened. "I wish I could tell you that everything will be peaceful from here on, but there are still forces at play. The curse may be lifted, but the scars of the past will not disappear so easily." Zakira sighed, her shoulders slumping. "The river may be healed, but what of my kingdom? What of the people? They've seen the poison, they've seen the destruction. How will they ever trust that the river is no longer cursed?" Azuka studied her for a moment, his brow furrowing. "The people must see it for themselves. The land and river will bear witness to your actions, and they will know that change is real. But you cannot force them to believe. You must lead them with your heart, as you've always done." Zakira knew he was right. The kingdom had been scarred by the curse, and it would take time to restore the trust that had been lost. But the people would follow her, she knew that much. She was their princess, their queen, and now, she was their protector, of both the land and the river. She turned to Azuka, her eyes steady. "We will rebuild. Together." The following days were spent in quiet contemplation and diligent work. Zakira had her hands full with the restoration of the kingdom. It wasn't just the land and river that needed healing, it was the people, the very heart of her kingdom. They had suffered for so long, under the weight of the curse, and now, they needed to know that the world had changed. Azuka stood by her side throughout it all. He had become her partner in more ways than one, helping her with the ceremonial duties, offering his wisdom, and guiding her in ways the people of the kingdom had never known. His presence was a comfort, a steadying force in the whirlwind of change. But despite their efforts, there were murmurs among the people. Whispers that the curse had not truly been lifted. They still feared the river, still saw it as a source of darkness and death. And worse, some believed that Zakira's bloodline was still tainted, that the sins of her ancestors could never truly be washed away. In one such gathering, Zakira stood before a crowd of her people. The royal palace behind her was once a place of darkness, of shadow, and deceit. Now, it gleamed in the light of a new dawn. Her voice rang out, firm and full of purpose. "The river has been healed," she said, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "The poison has been removed, the curse is no more. I have walked its depths, and I have seen its heart. The river is not our enemy, it is our protector. And together, we will ensure that the bond between water and earth remains unbroken." The crowd remained silent, some faces filled with doubt, others with hope. Zakira knew that it would take time for them to truly believe. They had witnessed the wrath of the river in the past, seen how it had claimed those before her. But now, they needed to understand that the river was not a punishment, it was a gift, a sacred force that needed to be respected. Azuka stood by her side, his presence a quiet strength. He had never fully revealed his true feelings for her, but in that moment, his gaze spoke volumes. He trusted her, believed in her, just as she had come to believe in him. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Zakira knew that her work was far from over. There were still many challenges ahead. There were those who would test her rule, who would seek to exploit the river's power for their own gain. And there were still the remnants of the old magic, lingering in the shadows, waiting for a chance to strike. But Zakira was no longer the same princess who had once been skeptical of the old ways. She was a queen, a protector of both land and river, and she would face whatever challenges came her way. Her kingdom needed her, and she would not fail them. The night was still, but the air was thick with tension. The shadows in the palace seemed to stretch longer than before, and Zakira felt the weight of her ancestors' legacy pressing down on her. As she sat alone in her chambers, contemplating the future, a knock at the door startled her. "Enter," she called. The door creaked open, and in walked Azuka, his expression somber. There was something in his eyes that made Zakira's heart skip a beat. Something urgent. Something wrong. "Azuka, what is it?" she asked, rising to her feet. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "There are whispers in the kingdom. Dark ones. They speak of a force rising in the east, something ancient, something tied to the river's original curse. I've felt its presence. I fear that there are those who seek to use the river's power for destruction. Zakira's blood ran cold. She had hoped that the curse was truly gone, that the darkness had been vanquished for good. But now, it seemed, the shadows of the past had returned to haunt them. We will not let them, Zakira said, her voice unwavering. We will face whatever comes. Together. Azuka nodded, his hand reaching out to her. Together. But even as they stood side by side, ready to confront the looming danger, Zakira knew that the battle ahead would test them in ways they had never imagined. The forces of the past had not been defeated, they had merely been dormant. And now, the storm was rising once again. The moon hung heavy over the palace, its light casting a silver glow over the land. Zakira stood on the balcony of her chambers, her eyes scanning the horizon. The night felt unusually still, the air thick with an unspoken tension. It was as though the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. Azuka had left her to rest, but sleep eluded her. The whispers of an ancient force rising in the east troubled her deeply. If what Azuka had said was true, then the curse that had haunted her family for generations had not been fully eradicated. And the shadow of it now loomed larger than ever. She had thought that by healing the river, by breaking the curse, she had secured her kingdom's future. But now, the creeping dread in her chest told her that there were still forces beyond her control, forces that had been waiting, hidden in the depths of the river, the very heart of her land. Zakira closed her eyes, steadying her breath. She had learned over the past few weeks that fear, though inevitable, could not control her. The future was uncertain, but one thing was certain, she would not let her kingdom fall into darkness again. She had to act before it was too late. The sound of footsteps broke her reverie. Turning around, she saw Azuka entering her chamber, his face drawn tight with concern. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced by a look of urgency. "Zakira, we need to speak," he said, his voice low but firm. Zakira didn't need him to explain further. She could see the worry in his eyes. The time for contemplation was over. There was something in the air, something dark, and it was drawing closer. "Tell me," she said, her voice steady despite the swirling anxiety inside her. "What have you learned?" Azuka's gaze flickered toward the horizon before he spoke, as if he could already feel the weight of the storm building in the distance. "There is a group, dark sorcerers who claim to be descendants of those who originally betrayed the river. They've been gathering strength in the east, in the ancient forests that border the kingdom. They believe that the river's power can be bent to their will. They don't want peace, Zakira, they want domination. The river is not a tool for them to heal or protect, it is a weapon to be controlled." Zakira's heart clenched. She had heard whispers of these sorcerers, but never believed them to be more than rumors. Now, it seemed, those rumors had turned into something very real, and very dangerous. "Why haven't we heard about them sooner?" Zakira asked, her voice rising with a mix of confusion and frustration. "Because they work in the shadows," Azuka replied. "They hide their intentions behind magic, behind old symbols that the people have long forgotten. But I can feel their presence, Zakira. It is growing stronger. And they are coming for the heart of the river." Zakira frowned, the weight of the threat dawning on her. The heart of the river, the very soul of Yavanna. It was the source of all the river's power, the place where the river god's magic flowed most strongly. If these sorcerers got their hands on it, they could control the river. They could undo everything she had fought for. "We can't let them reach it," she said firmly, her resolve hardening. "We'll stop them before they can do anything." Azuka nodded, but there was a hint of doubt in his eyes. "I agree, but it won't be easy. These sorcerers are powerful, and they have already begun gathering the remnants of the old magic, magic that can manipulate the very essence of the river. We will need more than strength. We will need knowledge. We will need to understand the ancient magic of Yavanna better than they do." Zakira turned toward the river, her gaze distant. She had spent her life rejecting the old ways, believing they were nothing more than myths, outdated and irrelevant. But now, she realized, those same ancient ways were the key to saving her kingdom. She had to learn everything, everything about the river, about the magic that flowed through it, and about the ancient pacts her family had broken. "We need to consult the elders," Zakira said after a long pause. "They know the old stories. They can help us understand what we're facing." Azuka's eyes narrowed, and he stepped closer. "Are you sure? The elders have not been trusted in your family for generations. Their knowledge is valuable, yes, but there is also distrust. They may not help us." "I don't care," Zakira replied. "I have no choice. We need to know what we're dealing with. I won't let my kingdom fall again, not when I have the power to stop it." Azuka sighed, clearly torn. "Very well. But be cautious. The elders are powerful in their own right. And they will not be swayed easily." Zakira nodded. She knew the risks. But the path forward was clear, even if it was fraught with danger. She would go to the elders. She would face the past, and she would fight to protect her kingdom and the river. The next morning, Zakira and Azuka set out for the hidden temple of the elders. It was deep within the sacred forest, far beyond the reach of most of the kingdom. The forest was thick with trees, their canopies so dense that little sunlight ever touched the forest floor. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and moss, and the sounds of animals rustled through the leaves. Zakira had always avoided the forest. It had been forbidden for generations, the elders' temple a place of mystery and secrecy. The ancient magic of the river lived there, and the elders were its guardians. Few had ever entered the forest and returned unchanged. But now, there was no choice. She had to seek their wisdom. As they made their way through the forest, Azuka's presence beside her was a constant reminder that they were not alone in this. The bond between them had grown stronger since the night of the river's healing. They were no longer just allies, they were partners. After what felt like hours of winding paths and thick undergrowth, they reached the temple. It was not a building in the traditional sense, but rather a structure woven into the heart of the forest itself, massive stone pillars intertwined with vines and roots, ancient symbols carved into the rock. It seemed to pulse with life, the magic of the river running through it. At the entrance stood an elder, an old man with long, white hair and eyes that gleamed with ancient wisdom. He looked at Zakira with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "You have come," he said in a voice that was both soothing and stern. "The time has come for the past to speak." Zakira took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She was ready. Whatever truths the elders held, she would face them. The elder's gaze was penetrating, his ancient eyes searching Zakira as though they could see into the very depths of her soul. He was silent for a moment, as if considering whether to speak. The air around them seemed to thrum with ancient power, a power that had not been felt in the kingdom for centuries. "You are brave to come here, princess," the elder said finally, his voice a deep, resonant whisper that carried the weight of the ages. "Many before you have come seeking knowledge of the river, but few have been ready for the truth it holds. You seek answers, but you may not like what you find." Zakira stood tall, her heart pounding with anticipation. She had come this far, and she would not turn back now. "I need to know everything. About the river. About the curse. And about the sorcerers who seek to control it." The elder studied her closely, and then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he gestured for them to enter the temple. As they stepped inside, the air seemed to grow even heavier, as if the very walls were alive with magic. The stone was warm to the touch, and Zakira felt an overwhelming sense of both awe and trepidation. At the heart of the temple was a pool of water, crystal clear and still. The surface gleamed with an ethereal light, and Zakira instinctively felt drawn to it. She could hear the soft whisper of water, like a voice calling her, pulling her in. "This is the heart of the river," the elder said, his voice softer now. "It is the source of all life, all magic. It was once pure, untouched by human hands. But when your ancestors poisoned it in their lust for power, they shattered the balance of the world." Zakira stepped closer to the water, gazing into its depths. It was mesmerizing, so deep, so vast, as though it held the secrets of the universe within it. And yet, there was something else, something darker lurking beneath the surface, something she could not name. "Your bloodline betrayed the river, princess," the elder continued, his tone solemn. And in doing so, they made an enemy of the very force that sustains this world. The river god, Uvana, cursed your family, cursed them to be bound to the river until the curse was broken. But the curse is not just about you. It is about the balance of the world itself. For as long as the river remains poisoned, the lands will wither. The skies will darken. And the very earth will crack. Zakira felt the weight of the elder's words pressing down on her chest. Her kingdom, her people, everything she had fought for, was connected to this river, to this magic. But what could she do to undo centuries of damage? Was it even possible? "Tell me what must be done," Zakira said, her voice firm despite the swirling uncertainty in her heart. "Tell me how I can stop the sorcerers. How I can protect my kingdom." The elder paused, his eyes glinting with a mixture of sadness and understanding. "There is a way. But it is not a simple task. To fully heal the river, you must first confront the darkness that resides within it. That darkness is not just a physical poison, it is the anger, the betrayal, the very essence of the curse that was cast upon your family. And you, princess, must face it, face the heart of the river itself. Only then can the balance be restored." Zakira's heart raced. Face the heart of the river. What did that even mean? Could she truly do it? Azuka, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. His voice was low, filled with urgency. "But there is more. The sorcerers who seek to control the river have already begun to gather the dark magic that was left behind by your ancestors' betrayal. They have already summoned the first wave of the river's wrath, and it is only a matter of time before they unleash it fully. If we do not act quickly, it will be too late." Zakira turned to Azuka, her mind racing. "So what do we do? How do we stop them?" The elder nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "To defeat them, you must first understand what they seek. They are not merely after power, they are after the heart of Uvana itself. The heart is the core of the river's magic, and it is tied to the river god's will. Whoever controls the heart controls the flow of life itself." Zakira's thoughts raced. She had heard of the heart of Uvana, of course. It was a legendary artifact, said to be so powerful that it could shape the world. But it was also said to be lost, hidden deep within the river's sacred depths. "But where is it?" she asked urgently. "Where can we find the heart?" The elder closed his eyes, as if in deep concentration. "It is hidden in the trench of the ancients, far beyond the reach of mortal hands. Only those who are truly worthy may approach it, and only those who understand the river's true magic can unlock its power. The sorcerers, however, do not understand the river. They think they can control it with their dark magic. They will fail. But they are powerful," Zakira said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. "They will not give up easily." The elder's gaze softened. "That is true. But you, princess, have something they do not. You have the blood of the river within you. Your connection to Uvana is not just a curse, it is a gift. And with that gift, you can find the heart. You can stop the sorcerers." Zakira was silent for a long moment, taking in the weight of the elder's words. This was it, the moment where her destiny would unfold. She had spent her life resisting the ancient ways, dismissing the old stories as mere myths. But now, standing before the heart of the river, she understood. The river's magic was part of her, and it was hers to wield, for good or ill. "We will go to the trench of the ancients," Zakira said at last, her voice resolute. "We will find the heart. And we will stop the sorcerers before they can destroy everything." Azuka nodded, his expression a mix of pride and caution. "Together, we can do this. But we must hurry. The sorcerers will not wait." The elder placed a hand on Zakira's shoulder, his touch surprisingly gentle. "May the river guide you, princess. Remember, the path you walk is not just one of power. It is a path of understanding. Only through understanding the river's true nature can you heal it, and heal yourself." With those words, Zakira and Azuka turned and left the temple, the weight of their mission pressing heavily upon them. The journey to the trench of the ancients would not be easy, and the dangers they would face were unknown. But Zakira was ready. For her kingdom. For the river. For the future. The wind howled as Zakira and Azuka stood on the shores of the sacred river Uvana, its waters rippling ominously under the dim glow of the moon. The river, once the lifeblood of her kingdom, now felt like a living entity, its currents twisting and shifting with a will of their own. The weight of the mission ahead pressed on Zakira's chest like a heavy stone, yet she knew she had no choice. The path to the trench of the ancients was fraught with danger, but it was the only way to stop the sorcerers from plunging her kingdom, and the world, into darkness. Azuka's sharp eyes scanned the water, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. He had been silent for much of the journey, a quiet tension hanging between them. Zakira had learned that Azuka had not only been a prisoner to the river's curse but had once been a part of her family's pact, an unwilling guardian to the very force that now threatened them all. She understood his burden more now, but it didn't make her feel any less determined. "We are ready," Azuka said at last, his voice low but steady. "The trench of the ancients is not far. But the river will test us. It always does." Zakira nodded, her heart resolute. "I've faced many tests in my life. I'm not afraid of a river." Azuka gave her a sharp look, but then his lips curved into a faint smile. "It is not the river you should fear, princess, but what lies beneath it." They stood at the edge of the river for a moment longer, the sounds of night creatures echoing around them. A faint shimmer in the water caught Zakira's eye, and she shivered. There was something alive in the river, something watching them. "I'll guide us through the first part," Azuka continued. "The currents near the trench are treacherous, and you'll need to be at your strongest. The heart of Uvana does not reveal itself easily." Zakira braced herself for what lay ahead. She had thought she understood the power of the river before, but this was something else entirely. The river wasn't just water, it was magic, ancient and primal, and it was bound to both her family and the curse that had been cast so long ago. She had to learn to understand it. To master it. "I'm ready," she said firmly. Azuka stepped forward, plunging his hand into the water. His eyes closed for a moment, and then he pulled his hand back, water swirling around it like a living thing. "Follow me," he instructed, stepping into the river without hesitation. "Trust in the current. Let it guide you." Zakira followed him, her feet sinking into the soft earth at the river's edge before she too waded into the water. The river's cool embrace surrounded her, and though the water was calm on the surface, beneath it, she could feel the restless pull of the currents, each one carrying her deeper into the river's mysteries. She could feel the weight of centuries-old magic swirling around her, the energy of the curse thrumming in the very water she walked through. Azuka led the way, his body gliding effortlessly through the water as though he had become one with it. Zakira struggled to match his pace, the weight of her robes and armor slowing her. But she refused to let that hinder her. She pushed forward, her resolve hardening with every step. The deeper they went, the darker the water became. The moonlight that had once lit their path now barely touched the water's surface, leaving them in an eerie, suffocating darkness. The air grew thicker, the very atmosphere heavy with ancient magic, and Zakira could sense something shifting beneath them. The river was alive, and it was watching. Suddenly, the water around them began to stir, growing more agitated. Zakira looked to Azuka, his face a mask of concentration as he held his arms out to steady them both. "This is it," he murmured. "The trench is close." The water surged violently, pulling at Zakira's legs, trying to drag her under. She gasped, her heart pounding in her chest as the currents whipped around her, testing her strength. But Azuka was there, his grip firm as he pulled her through the raging water. "Focus," he urged. "Feel the river, Zakira. It is not your enemy." Zakira took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm. She had faced danger before, but this felt different. This was not just a battle against men or beasts, it was a fight against fate itself. With each step, she felt the river's pulse beneath her feet, like a living heart, beating in time with her own. It was then that she understood. The river was not simply a body of water. It was a force, a spirit, and it was calling to her. She could feel its emotions, its pain, its anger, its sorrow, and somewhere deep within, she realized, it was also offering her a chance at redemption. "Help me," she whispered, almost to herself, though she knew Azuka could hear her. "Help me heal what was broken." Azuka's eyes softened, and he gave a single nod. "You are not alone in this, princess." The water began to calm as they neared the entrance to the trench. It was a massive chasm in the riverbed, its edges shrouded in mist. The waters here seemed to fall away into nothingness, as if leading to a realm beyond the physical world. Zakira couldn't help but shiver at the thought of what lay within. Azuka led her closer, his movements steady despite the ominous atmosphere. He seemed to be at ease in the depths of the river, but Zakira felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. "We are close," Azuka said, his voice tense. "But be prepared. The trench is not just a place. It is a test." Zakira nodded, steeling herself for whatever lay ahead. The river had already shown her its power, and she knew that the deeper they went, the more she would have to confront, not just the curse, but the truths hidden within her own bloodline. As they stepped into the trench, the water seemed to pull them in, faster and faster, until they were plunging into a darkness so deep it felt like an endless abyss. Zakira felt her body go weightless, suspended in the water, and she wondered if they were falling into another world entirely. Then, through the darkness, she saw it. A faint light, glowing from below. The heart of Uvana. Zakira's heart raced as the waters pulled her deeper, her surroundings becoming an endless blur of shifting shadows and flickering light. Every part of her body felt weightless, as though the very essence of gravity had been suspended by the river's ancient magic. She had been in the river before, on the surface, where she had felt the river's power in the ripples beneath her feet, but now it felt as though the river was consuming her whole. Azuka was beside her, his presence a constant, but in the depths, it was hard to make out his figure. The only thing that was certain was the glowing light ahead. It pulsed softly, calling to her like a distant memory. The heart of Uvana. She had heard tales of the heart, of its unimaginable power, its connection to the river god, and its ability to either heal or destroy. But now that she was here, in its presence, she could feel its weight. It wasn't just a force. It was a living thing, and it was waiting for her. As they descended into the darkness, the light ahead grew brighter, sharper, until finally, they arrived at the source. In the heart of the trench, a vast, luminous orb floated in the center of a crystal-clear chamber. It seemed to glow with the energy of the river itself, casting shimmering reflections across the walls of the chasm. Zakira's breath caught in her throat. The heart of Uvana was more magnificent than she could have imagined, its surface swirling with colors that reminded her of the river's many moods, calm blues, stormy purples, and the deep black of its shadowed depths. She moved toward it, mesmerized, but Azuka's hand on her arm stopped her. His grip was gentle but firm, his gaze cautious. "Be careful," he warned, his voice echoing in the stillness of the chamber. "The heart will test you. It will ask for your heart's true desire, and only then will it show you the path to salvation." Zakira nodded, her mind racing. She had come this far, but could she truly handle what the heart might reveal? The river had already shown her its power, its anger. Was she ready to face the truth of her family's betrayal? Taking a deep breath, she stepped closer to the heart. Its light flickered, then pulsed in a rhythm that matched the beating of her own heart. The water around her seemed to stir in response, and suddenly, the orb began to hum, sending waves of energy rippling through the river. It was alive. And it was waiting. Zakira reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she touched the surface of the orb. The moment her fingers made contact, a surge of power rushed through her. Visions flooded her mind, images of the past, the present, and the future, all intertwining in a chaotic dance. She saw her ancestors, standing on the banks of the river, their faces twisted with greed as they poisoned the waters, breaking the ancient pact with the river god. She saw Azuka, once a prince of the river, bound to the curse, his fate tied to hers by blood and betrayal. She saw herself, standing on the shore of the river, defiant and proud, about to fulfill a destiny she never asked for. And then, she saw something else. A new vision, one that made her heart stop. A future where the kingdom was engulfed by dark, roiling waters, its people lost in the tide of destruction. Where the sorcerers, her own people, had used the curse to take control, bending the river to their will, using its power to enslave the world. The visions faded, and Zakira was left breathless, her hand still pressed against the heart. She could feel its power surging through her, the weight of its judgment heavy on her soul. "You have seen what could be," Azuka's voice broke through her thoughts, his tone filled with sorrow. "But there is still hope." Zakira pulled her hand back, her mind racing with the knowledge she had gained. She understood now. The river was not simply a force to be controlled, it was a living being, and it could be healed. But the price would be high. The curse that had bound her family for generations had to be broken, and in doing so, she would have to confront the very thing that had caused the betrayal, the lust for power. "The river must be healed," Zakira said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "But it cannot be done with force. We must restore the balance. My family must atone for what they did." Azuka nodded, his eyes dark with understanding. "The heart can heal the river, but it needs your blood. Your sacrifice will bind the curse and free the river, but it will not come without consequences." Zakira closed her eyes, letting the weight of his words sink in. She had always known that breaking the curse would require a sacrifice, but she hadn't fully realized what that meant until now. The river would demand more than just her willingness. It would ask for her very essence. "I understand," she said softly. "I will do it. But I will not let the river be used for destruction any longer. I will break the curse, not for power, but for peace." Azuka gave her a solemn nod, his expression unreadable. "Then you must take the final step. The river will choose you, as it has chosen all those before you. But your choice will determine the future." With a deep breath, Zakira turned back toward the heart. Her fingers brushed against its surface once more, and this time, she felt the river's pulse in her very bones. The light around her grew brighter, and the water seemed to swirl in a frenzy, as though the river itself were alive with anticipation. "I choose peace," she whispered, her voice resolute. The heart pulsed in response, sending a shockwave through the water. Azuka reached out, catching her arm to steady her as the power of the river surged through her. Then, in a blinding flash of light, the river's magic enveloped her, and Zakira felt herself slipping into the depths once more. But this time, there was no fear. Only a sense of peace. Zakira awoke to silence. The river's magic had faded, leaving her in a place that was neither land nor sea. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the brightness that surrounded her. The trench of the ancients was gone, replaced by a serene, glowing expanse. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice a mere echo in the vast emptiness. A figure appeared before her. It was Azuka, but not the Azuka she had known. His form shimmered with the same light that filled the space, his features soft, almost ethereal. "You are where the river's soul resides," Azuka said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "You have made the ultimate choice, princess." Zakira stood, unsure of her next step, but a strange calm filled her heart. "What now?" Azuka's gaze softened, and he held out his hand. "Now, we return. The curse is broken. But the future is still yours to shape." Zakira took his hand, and as their fingers touched, the world around them seemed to shift. The river's power, now restored and at peace, surged once more, but this time, it was no longer bound by the curse. They emerged from the depths together, the river flowing gently beneath them as the sun rose on a new day. The waters of River Yavanna had calmed. No longer did they churn with the anger of the past. The curse was broken, but the ripples of its impact were felt across the land. Princess Zakira's mind was still heavy with the weight of her decision, but the peace that had come with it was undeniable. The river was no longer her enemy. It was part of her, an extension of her very being. She and Azuka had risen from the depths, their bodies gliding through the water like two souls intertwined by destiny. But now, standing on the banks of the river once more, the world felt different, strange, almost alien. The sun pierced the horizon, casting a golden glow over the water's surface, as if heralding a new dawn. The world was awakening, but the question still lingered, what now? "Azuka," Zakira said, her voice trembling slightly. "What happens to me now? To the kingdom?" Azuka, still shimmering with the ethereal light of the river's magic, gave her a solemn look. "You have healed the river, princess. but healing the land will take time. The kingdom, it is your home, and it is waiting for its ruler. Zakira looked back at the distant silhouette of her kingdom, perched on the cliffs overlooking the great river. Her heart swelled with a mixture of love and sorrow. The people had once depended on the river's power to sustain them. They had relied on its waters, its fertility, its strength. But now, the river was a reflection of balance, no longer a tool to be wielded. "I've broken the curse," she whispered, almost to herself. "But what will the people think of me now?" Azuka stepped closer to her, his eyes reflecting the depth of the river's mysteries. "They will see the truth when you return. The people are not blind to what you have done. They will understand. It is not the power that matters, but the heart behind the choice." Zakira nodded, though doubt still lingered in her mind. The kingdom had always revered the river's power, the very source of its prosperity. But would they accept that peace, rather than conquest, could bring them a future? Without another word, Azuka extended his hand once more, offering her the chance to return to her kingdom, to face her people and the world that had shaped her. Zakira took his hand, and together they stepped forward, their journey not yet complete. They would return to the land, but they would no longer be bound by the past. Chapter 24, The Princess and the River's Gift. As they traveled back toward the village, Zakira could feel the eyes of the people on her. Her heart raced with anticipation and fear, knowing the weight of her actions would soon be laid bare before them. The village, once vibrant and full of life, now seemed quieter. The streets, which used to be bustling with merchants and travelers, were eerily still. The people seemed to be waiting, watching, as if unsure of what to expect. Zakira was no longer just the princess. She had become a symbol of change, a beacon of the new world that had emerged from the broken river. She was no longer the ruler bound by the river's power, but a ruler who had broken the chains that once held her people captive. As she walked through the village, she could feel the whispers behind her. The elders, who had once revered the river as a god, were now unsure of what to believe. The river had always been their source of life, of strength, and the idea of a peaceful river, one that could heal instead of destroy, was almost too foreign to grasp. But Zakira was determined. The river had shown her the truth. It wasn't the power that mattered, it was the balance between nature and humanity, between power and mercy. When she finally reached the palace, she was greeted by her people. They had gathered to witness her return, and many of them were still uncertain of her choices. Some looked at her with reverence, while others with suspicion. But when Zakira took the stage, her presence alone spoke louder than any words could. She had faced the river's curse, broken it, and returned with the gift of peace. "I have returned," Zakira began, her voice ringing clear and strong. "Not as a ruler of the river, but as a ruler of the people. The river is no longer a force to be feared. It is a living thing, and it is part of us. Together, we must heal what was broken. Together, we must restore balance." She paused, letting her words sink in. The silence that followed was heavy, but Zakira was not afraid. She knew what needed to be done. She could feel the weight of her ancestors' actions, of the poison they had poured into the river, of the pact they had broken, but she also knew that the future was hers to shape. "I will not lead with fear. I will lead with understanding, with compassion, and with the knowledge that we are all connected to this land, to the river, and to each other," she continued, her voice unwavering. For a long moment, no one spoke. But then, one by one, the people began to clap, their hands slowly at first, but then building into a rhythmic applause. They had heard her words, and they had seen the truth in her heart. Zakira's eyes met Azuka's across the crowd. He stood at the edge of the palace grounds, watching her with quiet pride. The bond between them, forged in the depths of the river, was now unbreakable. Together, they had healed the land, and together, they would shape its future. The days that followed were filled with change. The river, once feared and revered, was now a symbol of hope, a reminder of the delicate balance between nature and humanity. The people of the kingdom, under Zakira's guidance, began to cultivate a new relationship with the land, one built on respect and mutual care. Azuka remained by her side, his connection to the river deepening as he helped her navigate the challenges of leadership. The bond between them had become more than just one of duty, it was a partnership, forged in the heart of the river, and it was unbreakable. As the years passed, the kingdom flourished. The people learned to respect the river's flow, to honor its power without trying to control it. Zakira ruled not with fear, but with wisdom, leading her people into a new age where peace, balance, and harmony were the cornerstones of their lives. But though the river had healed, there was still work to be done. The sorcerers who had once sought to harness its power remained a threat, and Zakira knew that there would always be forces that sought to disrupt the balance she had worked so hard to create. Still, with Azuka by her side and the support of her people, Zakira faced each challenge with courage and conviction. She had broken the chains of the past, but she would continue to shape the future. The river would never be the same, and neither would she.